Hokage, Chronicle of the True Farewell. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author, we are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 151, Beat Ebizo. You awakened a lion. As Uchiha Chi slammed his palm to the ground, the heavens curse seal dramatically increased his control over his body, to the point where a single seal was all it took to direct the chakra within his body, forming a network in a ninjutsu. Vast patterns of the technique spread outward, and a pale red barrier instantly rose from the ground. A ferocious tremor erupted across the desert. A massive red wall lifted the sand, trapping Uchiha Chi and Ebizo within the barrier. Ebizo stopped abruptly, frowning deeply as he surveyed his surroundings. Approaching the barrier's edge, he swung his hand, unleashing a wind-style wind blade, striking it. The sharp blade sliced through the barrier, smoothly carving a slit before surging outwards. The remaining slit quickly regenerated itself with visible speed, sealing seamlessly. The Uchiha village's regeneration barrier technique? I remember it being stolen by Hokage. I didn't expect the Uchiha had a hand in it. Seeing this, Ebizo couldn't help but frown. A full-strength wind style can cut through it, but it'll take some time. He exhaled suddenly, his brows instantly cold as he looked at the grinning brat, half his body covered in pitch-black lines. It was clear that Uchiha Chi wouldn't give him that time. Alice, Ebizo sighed suddenly, straightened his back, stretched his arms, and his eyes suddenly turned cold. He suddenly raised his chin, looked down at Uchiha Chi, and said calmly, I am old and don't want to kill, but you, little brat, insist on seeking death, so I'll play with you. Don't worry, it won't take long. Attention. Ebizo, the elder of Sunagakure village and the highest commander of Sunagakure, has murderous intentions towards you. As the old man raised his back, Uchiha Chi was horrified to discover that this man, who had seemingly been shorter than him, had, after stripping off his outer robe and stripping shirtless, stood a remarkable 1.8 meters tall. His muscles were muscular and smooth, especially his pectorals. Of all the people Uchiha Chi had ever seen, only Shenin's dancing pectorals could rival them. How the hell did this body look like that of a withered old man? Uchiha Chi's brows twitched slightly, but he suppressed his surprise. He immediately drew his Kusanagi sword with his backhand and raised the sea seal. Flowing flames instantly clung to the blade, forming a flaming katana. Without a word, a deafening sonic boom erupted around him, and he vanished instantly. Uchiha Chi lunged forward, his legs moving like the clanging of train wheels. Once he was in front of him, he leaped high, swung the hilt of his sword with all his might, and swung it from his right shoulder. A supersonic kasei slash descended, slicing down directly at Ebizo's neck. Flowing flames left arcs of blazing light in the wind. The blazing blade instantly ripped through the air. The flaming blade shone like fire, illuminating Uchiha Chi's scarlet, snake-like eyes, filled with murderous intent. Unlike his absurd immortality, ordinary ninjas were mostly high attack and low defense. A single blow from such a sword would surely kill them. However, Ebizo remained calm, unfazed by the blow. With a wave of his hands, he drew two kunai from the robe hanging at his waist, and exhaled a puff of bright yellow wind. The wind-style, vacuum blade instantly enchanted the two kunai, transforming them into two vacuum swords. The swords clashed, and the kunai collided instantly. Bang! Sparks and flames erupted. Ebizo raised his foot and kicked Uchiha Chi in the abdomen. Uchiha Chi immediately twisted his waist, pressing Ebizo's vacuum sword into the air, and then slashed back with his sword to his back. Ebizo sneered, rolled over to avoid the attack, and threw two kunai with vacuum swords at Uchiha Chi in the air. Seizing the opportunity when Uchiha Chi blocked, he grabbed Uchiha Chi's long hair with one hand and violently slammed him to the ground. Uchiha Chi frowned in surprise. This old man was actually a master of physical skills. If it had been before, he would have been unable to twist away in midair, and the two insidious kunai would have been shot like a hedgehog, and then his hair would have been pulled and he would have been beaten. But at this moment, the immense control of his body granted by the Heaven's Curse seal, the mastery of swordsmanship and physical techniques acquired during his recent incursion into the Sands village camp, and the seemingly unstoppable 360-degree infrared vision of the Curse Seal Sharingan combined to form a powerful force. Driven by his core battle intuition, he was now a completely different person. Facing Ebizo's attack, Uchiha Chi swung his blade to sever the strands of hair that had been pulled. He thrust his Kusanagi sword, piercing it deeply into the sand. Pulling the taut silk thread, he spun and leaped through the air like a gymnast, dodging 2 vacuum blades as he leaped down. With his feet twisting against the ground, his back, arms, and legs combined to unleash a powerful punch onto Ebizo's wrinkled face. Ouch! The blow instantly dislocated Ebizo's jaw, causing a sharp snap. 2 of his already limited teeth were also knocked out. Ebizo couldn't help but let out a cry of pain, his saliva splattering from the blow. His pupils suddenly constricted, completely unprepared for the brat's extraordinary control over his body. His taijutsu was so masterful. According to the intelligence sent back from Yuno Kuni, this brat's taijutsu would only be enough to withstand a beating from the Kurigakure's men. His taijutsu skills should be quite poor. And since Ebizo boasted of being the Tsunagakure boxing champion, this brat shouldn't be a match for him. Analyzing this intelligence, Ebizo changed his style and unleashed his hidden taijutsu, hoping to shock the brat with the power of a veteran boxer. But to his surprise, this brat's taijutsu surpassed his own. Uchiha Chi stared at his fist in astonishment, his eyes flashing with excitement. The thrill of punching the old man in the flesh, destroying his health insurance card, brought tears to his eyes. For so long, he had endured daily beatings from his elders, and had he ever experienced such a satisfying feeling? Instinctively, a murderous gleam flashed in Uchiha Chi's eyes. Before Ebizo could react, he clenched his fist, stepped forward, and jammed his foot between Ebizo's legs, tripping him up. Just as Ebizo sensed something was wrong and tried to steady himself, Uchiha Chi suddenly launched a rising dragon fist into the air, followed by a fierce elbow strike that slammed into Ebizo's face again, causing him to bleed profusely and momentarily lose his ability to counterattack. Then, as Ebizo stared in horror, Uchiha Chi roared and unleashed a continuous barrage of attacks. Ola 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 ola, a left hook to the head, followed by a left uppercut to the stomach, sending him flying. A sideways spin kick to the shoulder. A scorpion tail kick to the chest, sending him flying. A barrage of straight punches to the face, a violent knee to the abdomen, followed by a lion-like slash and a whip kick. Ebizo could only raise his arms to block the onslaught, his face gushing with blood as he struggled to hold on against a barrage of punches and kicks. Another powerful kick pierced Ebizo's chest, nearly causing him to curl up like a shrimp. A murderous look flashed in Uchiha Chi's eyes. His fingertips twitched the silk thread, causing the Kusanagi sword in the sand to suddenly lift its blade upwards. He raised his hand and grabbed Ebizo's forehead, pressing it down. This time, he intended to pierce Ebizo's head in his left hand, completely killing this old marathon lover. At this moment, the bright flash of the sword, the dazzling cold edge of the Kusanagi sword's tip, instantly awakened the momentarily stunned Ebizo. He immediately realized that if he pressed hard, he would be dead. Ebizo's eyes suddenly widened, their gleaming eyes gleaming with rage. The wrinkles on his face trembled with fear. How is this possible? How could I possibly die here? His face was grim as he stared at the sword tip before him, his eyes cross-eyed. Responding, Ebizo clasped his hands together, trembling and shouting, "Kid, you've awakened a lion of the sand?" The next moment, wind style, fierce wind palm, wind style, airflow dance, Ebizo raised his palms and pushed flat against the ground. A terrifying gust of wind rose from his palms, carrying the two of them high into the air. Then, just as his momentum was about to run out, Ebizo's eyes darkened, and he unleashed another deafening burst of airflow. The wind release technique, which required hand seals to activate, became practically a seal-free jutsu in Ebizo's hands. A roaring gust of wind instantly carried Ebizo and Uchiha Chi, who was gripping his head and stepping on his back, hurtling them diagonally into the sky at a terrifying speed, like a cannonball. In an instant, the two crashed heavily into the barrier high in the sky, sending the entire barrier bulging high and then rebounding. With this move, Ebizo spun in midair, glaring fiercely at the nearby. A sinister smile played on his lips, and he immediately formed hand seals with both hands, raising his palms to aim at Uchiha Chi, who was trapped in midair and with nowhere to hide. He roared, "Compound ninjutsu, wind release, thousand-faced wind blades." The violent wind converged with Ebizo as its center, lifting, squeezing, and drawing vacuum. The impact roared, and finally, It transformed into a sky full of invisible wind blades. Watching this move, Uchiha Chi felt his scalp tingle for a moment. He recognized it from the name, Wind Style, Wind Blade. It was the A-level wind style that had nearly killed Aburame Ryoma with a single strike. Invisible and colorless, it possessed incredibly powerful penetrating power. Uchiha Chi had also heard of another technique, Wind Style, Thousand Faces Wind. This advanced version of Wind Style, wind cutting technique condensed thousands of tiny wind blades, similar to the wind cutting technique, to attack the opponent. While densely packed, the power of each individual blade was modest. But when Wind Style, Thousand Faces Wind was combined with Wind Style, Wind Blade, creating the compound ninjutsu, Wind Style, Thousand Faces Wind Blade. The power, range, and even difficulty of this technique would far surpass the realm of A-level ninjutsu. Ebizo, this unassuming old man, had mastered such an S-level compound wind style, a combination of extreme wind style techniques. Instantly, Uchiha Chi gasped, his crimson, snake-like pupils shrinking. Chapter 152, Fierce Battle. The Night of Roaring Wind Blades. A raging wind surged skyward as Ebizo unleashed his jutsu. From a human perspective, one could only sense the gusts of wind gathering around Ebizo, a murderous aura lurking within them. A chilling feeling filled the air, unpredictable as to when and from what direction this incredibly dangerous attack would strike. But within the infrared vision of his snake-eyed Sharingan, Uchiha Chi could clearly see the wind style, wind blades forming within the wind. Formless and invisible, hidden within the wind, they possess the penetrating power of a tungsten armor-piercing bullet. The next moment, as Ebizo formed the final 10 seal with his hands, the wind blades suddenly coalesced. Instantly, a torrent of wind hurled itself towards Uchiha Chi. The winds were dense, like a torrential downpour, each drop as sharp as the world's sharpest knife. Oh my god, Uchiha Chi's eyes widened, his scalp tingling, his mind blank. But he was in midair, with nowhere to hide, he was being strafed like a sitting duck. He gritted his teeth, forming the Chen seal on his left hand. Wind style, sky-slashing extreme wave, he raised his palm, pointed it at the sky, and unleashed a wave of wind. It transformed into a massive surge of air pressure and ultrasonic waves, propelling him precipitously towards the ground. But it seemed a futile move. Under Ebizo's control, the wind blades in the sky twisted mid-air like maggots on the tarsal bone, and then shot towards him. As he plummeted, Uchiha Chi's mind raced, realizing that this was not a solution. Although he possessed numerous fire-style jutsu, and fire-style countered wind style, it depended on the person. With Ebizo's mastery of wind style, coupled with the extreme deformation of the wind blade technique, ordinary fire-style jutsu would be ruthlessly pierced by him. To counter this attack, he needed an equally refined fire-style ninjutsu. With this thought, Uchiha Chi's snake pupils widened, a glint of madness filing his gaze. He instantly dispersed the wind style he was spewing from his palms, twisting his body in midair, facing the incoming wind blades. With a flick of his index finger, a thread dragged the Kusanagi sword from the ground towards him. Uchiha Chi caught the Kusanagi sword and, using the hilt to press his heart, instantly ignited a blazing heart fire within the Kusanagi sword. Haha, he channeled all his chakra into fire-style chakra mode, then channeled this burning soul power completely into the Kusanagi sword. Unlike previous uses of this power, he had wielded dragon fire, transformed a giant sword, or freely extended and retracted a flaming blade. This raging flame, emanating from his heart and driven by his arms, was now completely compressed within the blade, not a single ray of fire escaping. The blade, inch by inch, was stained a blazing white. Bang! Having accomplished this, Uchiha Chi, with his back turned, slammed down from mid-air into the desert, sending a towering sandstorm through the desert. Immediately afterwards, a dense stream of wind blades rained down like rain. Tap, 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 tap. Like a machine gun, the entire desert where Uchiha had landed was covered in fire. Die, little brat, Ebizo observed the scene, a stern expression on his face, and roared furiously, "End your short life in this silent wind." Raining down, the entire battlefield was instantly enveloped in a depressing atmosphere. Only the dull sound of the wind blades raining down, piercing the desert floor. Ebizo unleashed the wind style once again, slowing his fall in mid-air and landing smoothly. He gasped for air, sweat streaming down his wrinkled face. Clearly, even an S-rank wind style had been quite a burden for him. "Oh, I'm really old," Less than half my chakra remains, but it's enough to tear open this regeneration barrier and escape. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Ebizo raised his palm and launched the wind style, sending a cloud of dust and sand scattering nearby. He doubted the imp would survive this level of attack. This wasn't rain, this was wind blades, sharper than knives. Surely, by now, the imp had been chopped to pieces. But just to be safe, Ebizo wanted to confirm the situation. The air currents quickly spread, swiftly and smoothly blowing the dust away, bringing the scene before him into sudden clarity. However, at the scene before him, Ebizo's eyes suddenly widened, his breathing froze. How is this possible? At that moment, above the sand pit, amidst a torrential downpour of wind blades raining down from the sky, a blood-soaked youth, wielding a long sword as radiant as the sun, danced in the rain, stomped his feet in the raging wind, charging madly towards him, closing in on him. The blazing white blade slashed with arcs of light like pinwheels, slicing through the approaching wind blades like a hot knife through butter, shattering them into scattered gusts of wind, piercing the youth's body with blood. In those scarlet, snake-like pupils, almost no trace of human color could be seen. The pitch-black vertical pupils glanced at him briefly, then shrank slightly, revealing a look of indifference and madness, a stark imitation of Orochimaru's. He looked like a snake bathed in blood, heading for death. Ebizo felt as if he had been bewitched by this sudden glimpse. His heart suddenly stopped, as if someone had grabbed hold of his heart. His pupils shrank as he stared in horror at Uchiha Chi, who continued to advance through the wind and rain. His gaze fixed on his pristine, white right arm. What was going on? Ebizo clearly remembered that just now, this brat had no right hand. And according to the intelligence he had gathered, this brat couldn't regenerate a severed limb. At best, he could only sew up the remains and rapidly regenerate. Furthermore, the brat had already been through a battle, with little chakra left, so even this super-fast regeneration ability must be limited. So, what had happened? Ebizo's scalp tingled for a moment as he stared in horror at Uchiha Chi, who continued to advance, constantly injured, yet still persevered in the fight. Is this still human? Is this still human? We can't let him get any closer. I'm no match for him in physical combat, this is the only way. Ebizo gritted his teeth. A dull pain crept across his face as he watched the approaching Uchiha Chi. A shudder ran down his spine as he recalled the painful memory of being beaten by that brat. He decisively pulled a scroll from the pouch tied around his waist. Biting his fingertips, he formed hand seals, Haisu Yushen Wei. Spiritual puppetry technique, the three Kanmatsu men, with a bang, smoke billowed. Three grim-faced puppets, draped in white robes inscribed with the words Buddha, Dharma, and Monk, appeared. Ebizo's face darkened, revealing a look of wrath like Achilles. Three machine maneuver. Dance of blades, 10 fingers laced together, and over 10 strands of chakra emanated from the puppets. Clack, 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 clack. Three grim-faced puppets instantly swung blades from their arms, leaping out, charging straight at Uchiha Chi. Ebizo, constantly manipulating the puppets, even found the energy to intersperse hand seals. Gales of wind rose from his body. In an instant, he strode forward, standing firm like a turret. Wind style, high sky cannon, wind style, wind blade, wind style, Kameidachi jutsu, countless wind blades and air cannonballs blasted from his mouth, pelting Uchiha Chi. A raging storm intertwined with the cold, gleaming shimmer of broken blades. At this moment, a night of roaring wind blades suddenly erupted. Chapter 153 The White Snake Immortal exclaimed that this boy is rising to prominence. To survive and continue fighting in this near-fatal situation, Uchiha Chi had few options. Facing multiple levels of wind style, wind blades, this A-rank wind style, capable of transforming and practically ignoring attribute restraint, his only recourse was to employ his strongest fire style, chakra mode. He channeled all his chakra into the Kusanagi sword, continuously compressing it in the same manner as when using flame fist form, ultimately forming a blazing white sword as brilliant as the sun. This highly concentrated fire attribute chakra, aided by the Kusanagi sword's transformation and enabling sustained combat, gave the sword the formidable power to sever wind style, wind blades. Such an action was undoubtedly madness. At that moment, Uchiha Chi was in curse seal form. His internal chakra and the Ryochi cave's natural energy, constantly transforming his body from the heavenly curse seal, were already entangled and restrained. To drain all his chakra in exchange for the power to break through the impasse would mean surrendering his entire body to the Raichi Cave's natural energy. Even while his own chakra was still present, this natural energy had already forcibly genetically altered his eyes and legs, and was subtly transforming his entire body. One by one, snake-like abilities were already manifesting within him: infrared sensing, scale aura, body manipulation, the speed of a black mamba, and many more abilities Uchiha Chi had yet to discover. The chakra that belonged to him was the last barrier preventing him from completely transforming from a human into a snake. And now, Uchiha Chi had, without a word, siphoned it away. Even Orochimaru would have cried out in shock at such a move. But for Uchiha Chi, it was nothing. He wasn't afraid of death, so why would he fear a mere transformation into a snake? Now, falling from the sky, lying on his back in the desert, Uchiha Chi's body was wailing. He stared at the rain of wind blades pouring down from the sky, his left hand tightly gripping a white-hot sword as bright as the sun. But he didn't even have the strength to rise and swing. He'd given it his all. Now, he could only gamble himself on the poker table. Uchiha Chi's eyes trembled slightly, his scarlet, snake-like pupils fixed on the impending wind blade. His eyes were bloodshot, his face grim, and he clenched the hilt of his sword while vomiting blood. Then, with his last remaining strength, he placed the sword across his neck, aiming it at the Heaven's Curse seal. It was as if he were about to commit suicide. The intense heat from the incandescent blade instantly pierced the skin, revealing the dense white scales beneath his neck. Then, Uchiha Chi roared a threat. Now, immediately, Heaven's Curse seal, give me power, give me the power to slay the powerful enemy, break the battle, and shoulder the responsibility of the future and dreams, no matter good or bad, no matter good or evil, at all costs. Even if I become a reptile, that doesn't matter, do you understand? As long as it's power, give it all to me. As Uchiha Chi's frantic voice fell. The next moment, a faint green light suddenly shone from the source of the Heaven's Curse seal. Its scales suddenly ripped apart, and a small white snake emerged. The small white snake suddenly opened its mouth, and a black-haired, pale young man tore it open and struggled to crawl out. Then, Orochimaru's voice, filled with astonishment and disbelief, rang out. Uchiha Chi, what have you done? Meanwhile, within a temple deep within Raichi Cave, one of the three legendary holy sites, perched on a throne beneath a Buddha statue, its densely packed scales imbued with the Buddha's light, clung to a giant white-scaled snake that had survived for over 1,000 years. This enormous snake wore a green cat's eye on its chest, a purple silk ribbon as a foreguard, and a military green horn-shaped ornament inlaid on the front. A red knight-shining pearl crowned its head, and a pipe clung to its mouth. Its body was as long as a river bridge, and 2 golden rings adorned its torso. It was none other than the White Snake Sage, the master of Raichi Cave, revered by the world as a sage. The White Snake Sage spent most of her time sleeping, for everything that happened in the ninja world reached her ears, a cacophony that was too jarring and tiresome. But at that moment, give me power, do you understand? If it's power, give it all to me. A clear, furious roar from a young man suddenly pierced her sweet dream, reaching her ears. The White Snake Sage suddenly opened her eyes, revealing a pair of dazzling golden, snake-like pupils. Shock filled her gaze. Damn it, how is this possible? Someone outside Raichi Cave has mastered Raichi Cave Sage Mode. Only the voice of a human possessing Sage Mode could penetrate her dreams. This was the threshold she had set for her slumber. Every human who mastered Raichi Cave Sage Mode was a prime chess piece and plaything, worthy of her manipulation, a chance to break the deadly silence. But, this voice. The white snake immortal suddenly raised its massive head, its pupils piercing the mist between worlds as it gazed outward. Then, it saw Uchiha Chi, roaring furiously, lying in the desert of the Wind Kingdom. After clearly gazing at the chaotic anatomy of the imp's body, the white snake immortal gasped, a drop of sweat larger than a bust dripping down her forehead. Look, what a marvel she had seen. She remembered the last imp who had come to her seeking immortality, saying that if you lived long enough, you'd see interesting things. But now, what she saw wasn't interesting at all. This was a divine child, a sight unseen in the Dragon Caves thousands of years. He so openly embraced the energy of nature. He so openly accepted the twisted evolution of life. He so openly reached out to her, seeking strength, the path to further advancement, the path from snake to dragon. He was like a heavenly being from myth. The moment she laid eyes on Uchiha Chi, the white snake immortal's golden pupils shrank to the size of pinpoints. Over the millennia, the white snake immortal should have been accustomed to encountering madmen seeking power, but she had never seen a human so mad. The natural energy within him didn't run wild, instead, it was captivated by his cells, which constantly thirsted for battle. It endowed him with superpowers beyond human power, forcibly sustaining him in such extreme combat. Now, she was on the verge of sacrificing herself to power this imp, but at this moment, the natural energy from the dragon earth cave infused into the imp was too weak to sustain his transcendental evolution. And this imp possessed such talent. This kind of determination surpassed the will of all who came to the dragon earth cave seeking power. This kind of faith, completely unconcerned with being unhuman, was the very snake that becomes a dragon that they, the dragon earth cave, had always sought. No, this kid has the potential to truly transform into a dragon and reach the other side of Longdi Cave that no one has been able to reach for thousands of years. We absolutely cannot let him die. The white snake immortal looked at Uchiha Chi, who was about to be beaten to death, and her scalp tingled. Her snake body trembled wildly, causing the entire Longdi Cave to shake. She suddenly raised her huge snake head and used her tail to roughly pull off the green cat's eye stone hanging around her neck. She opened her mouth and roared angrily at the temple. Tianzin, Tianzin, Shichu, and Tuanjin, those three dead girls, where are they? Quick, send the J to me. Chapter 154, The Last Lesson. White Scale Snake Wall. On the border of the Wind Country, across the desert connecting to the Gobi Desert, Uchiha Chi, lying on the ground, and Orochimaru, emerging from the snake's mouth, stared at each other, their eyes wide open. The atmosphere froze for a moment. Master Orochimaru, Uchiha Chi hadn't expected this unexpected appearance of an outsider at a time when he was draining his chakra and could only hope for a burst of energy from the Raichi cave. But thinking about it made sense. The Heaven's Curse Seal, also known as the Curse Seal Body Hosting Technique, was one of Orochimaru's immortality techniques, housing a fragment of Orochimaru's soul. In the future, during the battle between Sasuke and Itachi, Orochimaru had used this technique, taking advantage of Uchiha Sasuke's weakness to emerge from the seal and attempt to seize Sasuke's body. But Uchiha thought, this didn't make sense. Orochimaru wasn't trying to seize his body at this point. So what was Orochimaru trying to do by emerging? At that moment, Orochimaru crawled out of the white snake's mouth and landed on the ground. His eyes narrowed as he stared at Uchiha Chi, who lay supine, half his body covered in the dark lines of the Heaven's Curse Seal, having practically killed himself. In reality, he hadn't created this on his own, he had been spontaneously expelled by the natural energy within the seal. While his original form was still alive, the now extracted Orochimaru was merely a shadow clone, designed to prevent the forbidden technique from creating multiple Orochimarus simultaneously, creating the paradox of a single soul operating in multiple threads. This Orochimaru's memories remained stuck in the underground caves of the Unokuni evil god cult, when he had infused Uchiha Chi with a Heaven's Curse Seal, dissected him, and decided to accept him as his apprentice. So, in Orochimaru's eyes at that moment, how long had it been? Why was this kid dying again? And why did I say again? Orochimaru only felt his scalp tingling and was speechless, but soon he forced himself to calm down. He raised his hand and placed a palm on Uchiha Chi's shoulder, his snake eyes coldly and emotionlessly exploring the current situation in Uchiha Chi's body. Soon, he narrowed his eyes and pondered, sure enough. This kid used the Heaven's Curse Seal. It's been a long time, half a year, or a year? My idea is right. With the help of this kid, I should have mastered the Heaven's Curse Seal by now, but it's still not perfect. I still can't solve the difficulty of fusing the seal with the fairy chakra. Fortunately, this kid has a strong body and is durable enough. The natural energy cannot reverse the soul body solidified by the immortal body. It cannot instantly turn him into a snake, and can only continuously transform his body structure in a roundabout way. In other words, this kid subdued the violent natural energy of the Ryuchidon with his body alone. Then, the remaining problem is how to use this natural energy. Orochimaru stared at Uchiha Chi on the ground, his thoughts running rapidly in his mind, his snake eyes narrowed slightly, as if he saw a very interesting experimental product. Suddenly, he laughed hoarsely, haha. Interesting. Orochimaru raised his head and looked at the wind style. Thousand wind blades flying all over the desert night sky, frowned slightly. Is it the sand village technique that can use this level of wind style? Is it Ebizo? He just wanted to study the changes brought about by the Heaven's Curse Seal, but the coverage of this technique greatly affected his research. This is really annoying. I can only let the main body study it. Orochimaru frowned impatiently, snorted coldly, raised his hand to extract some natural energy from Uchiha Heaven's curse seal, and exhaled heavily. Now, we have to let this kid survive first. He quickly formed seals with both hands, and then suddenly slapped them to the ground. Senjutsu, inorganic reincarnation, secret technique, serpent hardening. The next moment, the desert floor around Uchiha and Orochimaru suddenly sank. Vast tracts of sand were drawn upward by the inorganic reincarnation technique, forming a massive sand pit. Under the influence of the Senjutsu, the sand transformed into massive, thick pythons, gathering into a cage-like wall of snakes reaching toward the sky. Then, under Orochimaru's hand seals, the unconscious giant snakes hardened their bodies. This complex ninjutsu rapidly achieved an extreme transformation of nature and form in a remarkably short period of time. Orochimaru knew Senjutsu, he simply couldn't enter Sage Mode. Inorganic reincarnation wasn't exclusive to the future Sage Mode version of Kabuto Yakushi. Orochimaru also knew it, and he mastered it even more proficiently than Kabuto Yakushi, even without the need for hand seals. He had used this technique against Four Tails Naruto, transforming the Kusanagi sword into a snake through inorganic reincarnation. Unlike Kabuto's disgraceful technique of turning inorganic reincarnation into earth escape, Orochimaru's technique was a true dragon earth cave technique. It truly transformed inorganic matter into life. Uchiha watched Orochimaru's series of maneuvers in a daze. From his perspective, he saw Orochimaru suddenly give him a sinister sneer, then mutter to himself, "I have to keep this brat alive." Then he began to demonstrate his mastery as a top-tier ninja. Gazing at the dense mass of giant steel snakes dancing wildly towards the sky, Uchiha froze, wondering if something had gone wrong. He was going to explode. He was going to explode. This wasn't Bleach vs Naruto, and he didn't even press O to call for help. How did things turn out like this? Orochimaru calmly gazed at the rain of death pouring down from the night sky, then stood up with his hands behind his back. Lying on the ground, Uchiha could clearly see that as the technique was cast, vast quantities of chakra were frantically drained, and the sand on the ground continuously transformed into giant steel snakes that hurtled towards the sky. Orochimaru's body was rapidly becoming shriveled and emaciated, resembling a skeleton. Uchiha's snake pupils suddenly shrank. As he watched the scene of flesh and blood dissolving, he couldn't help but panic, and stared at Orochimaru in astonishment. The Orochimaru that crawled out of his body at this moment was not the Orochimaru he had seen on the battlefields of Sans Village in the past few days, who had already mastered the forbidden technique of flesh transformation and had initially perfected his immortality. The Orochimaru at this stage had not yet mastered the forbidden technique of immortality. In other words, with such a massive chakra withdrawal, the Orochimaru before him would truly die. "Wait, Orochimaru, what are you doing?" Orochimaru turned his back and gave a hoarse laugh. He raised his head, gazed at the sky with his dim golden eyes, and spoke calmly, "Uchiha, I don't know what happened in the future, but," he tilted his head slightly, his dim golden eyes glancing at Uchiha, a hint of a curve at the corner of his mouth, and he laughed hoarsely. "That title just now was quite nice, teacher." Orochimaru turned his head and said calmly without looking back, "Then let me teach you one last lesson, you." Uchiha stared at him with wide eyes, his heart tightening, and he was a little overwhelmed. This sea made him feel as if he was back in the volcanic sea, protected by the old man Uchiha Setsuna. Orochimaru took a deep breath, his tone returning to its cold tone. He frowned and said hoarsely, "Listen carefully, the curse seal technique is not perfect. I don't have much chakra stored in it, so I can't help you kill that old man outside, but in order to reach the edge of our common dream, you must save yourself." The moment the voice fell, Orochimaru's body was like a candle in the wind, only a piece of skin wrapped around bones. But he stood firm in the gust of wind. He raised his head slightly, raised his hand and formed an unseal. From Orochimaru's mouth, a huge white-scaled snake suddenly vomited out. It rushed towards the sky, coiled up its body, and transformed into a final snake wall above Uchiha's head. The white-scaled snake lowered its head, bearing the deep cuts and blood-splattering wind blades that kept falling on its body. It stared at Uchiha, opened its huge mouth, and uttered a final hoarse voice, "Remember, pure natural energy is not useless, you must follow your body, go find the answer." Chapter 155 Either become an immortal or die. As Orochimaru finished speaking, Uchiha's serpentine pupils shrank. Pure natural energy could be used. But how was that even possible? For a human ninja to master Senjutsu, the only way was to combine physical, spiritual, and natural energies into a single entity, creating Senjutsu chakra and entering Sage mode. This was written into the official manual, the fundamental rule of the ninja world. Given such a rule, Orochimaru actually told him it could be broken? So what was he supposed to do? Uchiha Chi gritted his teeth, staring at the snake wall, which was constantly being hammered down by wind blades, making a thud and trembling sound. It seemed clear that this barrier wouldn't hold for much longer. His mind raced, constantly recalling the manga and anime from his past life, trying to find the answer. But no matter how hard he searched, he couldn't recall anything relevant. Then, suddenly, his mind flashed back to Orochimaru's last words to him. Follow your body and find the answer. Those words, like a ray of light, instantly made Uchiha Chi look up. This reminded him of how he'd resisted when Orochimaru had thrust the Heaven's Curse seal into him. Back then, he was unconscious and chakra-less, even worse off than he was now. How had he managed to dissipate the violent natural energy from the Ryuchidon cave that had flooded his body? At this thought, Uchiha Chi's pupils suddenly constricted, and he gazed at his own body. If there was a technique that could tame the violent forces of nature, it would be the forbidden technique, flesh regeneration. This forbidden technique, which expended even the power of the tailed beasts as compensation, consumed the body's vitality. At that moment, Uchiha Chi felt as if a whole new world had opened up. His Sharingan fixed his gaze on the Ryuchidon cave's raging, twisting energy within him. He took a deep breath, then held it, unleashing the forbidden technique, flesh regeneration. Instantly, the dark lines that had covered half his body, threatening to spread throughout his entire body, twisted madly. Then, they retracted, and retracted again. The raging natural energy was captured by the forbidden technique, flesh regeneration, ignited, and transformed into new power. Like a roaring diesel engine, it crushed, collided, ignited, compressed, and exploded. Boom! His heart began to beat at a speed beyond that of a normal human. Hot blood flowed throughout his body, and an endless stream of vitality surged out like spring rain, constantly repairing his weakened body. Wounds healed, flesh revitalized, and an endless supply of his own chakra was extracted and then once again poured into the forbidden technique, flesh regeneration. Uchiha Chi suddenly thrust himself forward, unexpectedly being lifted upright by the surge of chakra. His severed right arm instantly grew flesh and reshaped its bones, repairing itself to the elbow in the blink of an eye. However, this seemed to be the limit. The dark lines of the Heaven's Curse seal that had covered his body had now retreated back to his neck, returning to its original form as the flower of heaven's evil. Even the serpentine manifestations that had appeared on his body quietly faded. The Heaven's Curse seal continued to absorb the natural energy from the air, pouring it into his body as new fuel, but its speed had noticeably slowed. Not enough, not nearly enough. This is enough to save myself, but not enough to fight. Uchiha Chi gripped the incandescent longsword, closely observing the chakra flowing through his body, gnashing his teeth. Consuming the Heaven's Curse seal's power would continuously provide chakra to support the forbidden technique, but at the same time, his body would revert back to normal human form. At this critical moment, Uchiha Chi needed powerful combat capabilities more than his hyper-regenerative abilities to constantly repair his body. Even if he transformed into a vicious snake, the acquisition of those abilities, infrared sensing, snake scale amulet, snake body manipulation, and rapid transformation, would be worth it. He couldn't let Ebizo escape. If he let the old man escape, the precious opportunity secured for him by Uchiha Shinichi, Shisui, Inuzuka Chi, Root Ninja B, and Abure Ryoma would be meaningless. But at this moment, as if answering Uchiha Chi's innermost desire, suddenly, a light flashed from the Heaven's Curse seal on Uchiha Chi's neck. Then, the scene before him suddenly spun. When he opened his eyes again, he was already deep within a vast snake cave. From the far side of the cave, the faint sound of wooden fish drumming echoed. Through the deep darkness, he could vaguely discern a towering temple, so vast it stretched as far as the eye could see. A giant green snake, its head visible only, suddenly emerged, nearly crushing the entire mountain wall. As Uchiha Chi stared in astonishment, the snake, its head and tail indistinct, its immeasurable size, twisted and turned before him, transforming into a beautiful young woman. She wore a white gown and a golden crown crowned with a golden bead. She looked like a celestial being, a beauty as dignified as jade. Uchiha Chi blinked, and before he could register what had happened, the woman's voice, cold yet solemn, suddenly rang out. The new psychic of Raichi Cave, you seek to gain power beyond humanity, beyond all power. Uchiha Chi, startled, looked up at the woman before him, his mind aching with wonder. Wasn't this woman Yonzin Shenji, one of Raichi Cave's higher-ups, hailed as the White Snake Immortal's most trusted confidant? Was he being reverse-enhanced, or had he been tricked by the Snake Princess's ability to transform the vast expanse of Earth into Raichi Cave's castle? And what exactly was this Heaven's Curse seal? In Uchiha's hands, wasn't it a powerful weapon? Why had it become a passive summoning skill in my hands? However, upon hearing the other party's words, without the slightest hesitation, Uchiha Chi turned back, his gaze urgent and his tone decisive. Give it to me, no matter the risks, it doesn't matter, as long as it's power. Leave it all to me. Tianzin Shenji looked at the young man before her, her gentle eyes instantly transforming into elongated golden serpents, fixed on Uchiha Chi's Sharingan, which, even after the Heaven's Curse seal faded, retained its serpentine form. A flicker of astonishment crossed her eyes. Someone could actually perfectly fuse natural energy with a human body. This was a feat unmatched in millennia. Recalling the White Snake Immortal's words, Tianzin Shenji suppressed her inner shock and quietly removed a green cat's eye from her bosom. Then, with a hissing sound, she squinted her eyes, hissing her tongue, licking it across her lips and teeth. The disguised girl's expression changed, revealing her true form as the Dragon Earth Cave Serpent. Her beautiful nose instantly transformed into a snake's, and her cherry lips transformed into a bloody maw. In the boundless darkness, she stared at Uchiha Chi dimly, then sneered, "Hellholy, in that case, come and get it." Tianzin Shenji raised her hand from her bosom and showed Uchiha Chi a green cat's eye that emitted a faint fluorescent light in the darkness. Then, her indifferent and ruthless voice resounded throughout the Longdi Cave. You only have one chance, human, either become an immortal of Longdi Cave, or die. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156. Such an immortal figure has not been seen in 1,000 years. Uchiha Chi was currently in a precarious position. He possessed a multitude of forbidden techniques, each of which consumed a significant amount of chakra. He wanted to use his immortality and super regeneration abilities to fight his enemies, but the chakra he gained from these transformations was barely enough for him to escape, far from sufficient to battle a cage-level warrior. Furthermore, foregoing regeneration and using the Heavenly Curse seal would only yield enough power to overcome his current predicament. So, when the fluorescent green cat's eye stone appeared before him, he didn't hesitate. He raised his left hand and grasped it. The moment he grasped the stone, Uchiha Chi's vision was ablaze with light. The entire world before him suddenly transformed. Within this deep snake cave, fluorescent green points of light floated in the air, connecting with each other. Streaks of green radiant light crisscrossed, blocking out the sky and illuminating the entire Raichi Cave. The dark, damp, eerie, murky, and muddy Dragon Earth Cavern suddenly transformed into fairyland. This is, Uchiha Chi's serpentine pupils shrank slightly. He could sense the violent power contained within these countless points of light. It was pure, natural, and belonged to the might of this world itself. Can you see? You can actually see, beside Yonzin Snake Princess, a beautiful lolly girl suddenly appeared. She had long dark blue hair, eyes as blue as the sky, and wore a golden crown like Yonzin Shenji. At this moment, she rushed forward eagerly, and her playful and cute face was instantly torn apart by a hideous snake face. The snake pupils stared at Uchiha Chi and asked excitedly, "What does that look like? What does the real dragon cave look like? Tell me." She hesitated, took small steps, and rushed forward nervously. Suddenly, her footsteps stopped, her snake nose twitched, and two cold rays of light suddenly shot out of her cold snake pupils. Hiss! What a good smell! What a good smell! I want to eat you. As long as I eat you, I can also get such eyes, such abilities. Get such a chance to become a dragon. Ha 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 ha, hiss. Hiss. Uchiha Chi looked at her in astonishment. The next moment, the beautiful woman suddenly raised her hand and, with her blue nails, tore open her human snake face. A massive snake maw instantly filled Uchiha Chi's vision. A stench, a chill, and the instantaneous premonition of death sent a tingling sensation down Uchiha Chi's spine. This was a mortal threat even more terrifying than facing Ebizo's S-rank wind release. Ichijishima. What are you doing? A loud cry rang out, and a fairy with long brown hair flew through the air. The next moment, she transformed into a terrifying brown serpent, slamming down and wrapping herself around the blue serpent that Ichijishima had transformed into. As Uchiha Chi froze, nearly being devoured, the two serpents tangled. The entire Ryochi cave trembled at the collision of the two immortal snakes. Countless snakes raised their heads, glanced in that direction, and began to flee. Tanjin, Shianksen, don't you understand? He saw it, he actually saw it. Tears welled up in the eyes of the giant blue snake transformed by Princess Ichikishima. It opened its maw excitedly and tore a large chunk of flesh from Princess Tanjin, swallowing it with tears in its eyes. She roared in a voice trembling with emotion, this power, destroyed by the goddess of Mao, was reborn after millennia. This is the final treasure of the apocalyptic world. This is the key to becoming a dragon. Woo woo woo. He really saw it. Thousands of years. Millennia of waiting for this opportunity. I'm going to eat him. I'm going to eat him. I absolutely must eat him. As these excited, wailing cries faded, the three snakes simultaneously turned their gazes towards Uchiha Chi. Their gazes suddenly shifted, becoming greedy, cold, indifferent and selfish. Even Princess Shianksen, still maintaining her human form, turned a subtle, hostile look towards Uchiha Chi. Uchiha Chi swallowed, his scalp tingling. This dragon cave doesn't seem like a charity, does it? The next moment, the two giant snakes stopped tangling, suddenly turned their heads, and swooped down at Uchiha Chi with their maws wide open. He's mine. No, you bitch, he's mine. Tianzin Shenji's eyes flashed coldly. She passed over the two giant snakes, floating in midair and flying towards them. Her cherry-like mouth opened wider and wider, until it completely obscured Uchiha Chi's vision. Haha. Hiss, two idiots, this brat is mine. Staring at the enormous snake mouth before him, with no escape, Uchiha Chi felt a chill run down his spine. Man, isn't this a case of cheating? Why did these old men, no, old women, suddenly change their attitude and want to eat him? And how did his useless body suddenly become the coveted Tang monk's meat? The disparity in the world left Uchiha Chi no time to complain. He gritted his teeth, his eyes fierce, and clenched the green cat's eye stone tightly in his hand. He exerted force with his palm. Snap! The green cat's eye stone was instantly crushed by Uchiha Chi. Before him, a fairyland of brilliant light shone brightly, countless green points of light crisscrossing the sky. Instantly, as if finding an outlet, they all converged on Uchiha Chi. He only had time to grasp the smallest of light points and threads. Boom! The scene before him shattered and collapsed. The border of the Wind Kingdom, an endless desert. The high-pressure winds whipped the boy's long black hair from his forehead, ruffling the tattered high-collared black Uchiha robe he wore. Uchiha Chi opened his scarlet, snake-like Sharingan. A cold gaze instantly pierced through the high dust clouds kicked up by the thousand-faced wind blades. He fixed his gaze on Ebizo, who was soaring down and landing steadily not far away. Uchiha Chi took a deep breath, raised his left hand, which was tightly gripping the blazing white longsword, and spread his pinky finger. Fragments of green cat's eye fell from it. A ball of emerald green light, invisible to the human eye, quietly floated above his palm, a dense mass of light points. Is this the power of an immortal? Uchiha Chi muttered to himself. He suddenly raised his palm and pressed the ball of light against the heaven's curse seal on his neck. Instantly, a terrifying surge of power flowed through the heaven's curse seal into his body. The stagnant forbidden technique, flesh transformation, roared into action once again. Flesh reassembled, bones built, and muscle fibers stretched. A complete right arm suddenly extended from the severed part of Uchiha Chi's right arm. Even after completing all this, the power continued to spread. The heavenly evil flower on his neck blossomed beautifully, and black lines instantly covered half of Uchiha Chi's body. The lost power returned, spreading through every limb, gathering, rioting, and mutating. This was the power of the curse, the immortal power of the Dragon Earth Cave. At this moment, within the vast sand pit, the towering snake wall collapsed and shattered, and endless invisible wind blades shot down. Uchiha Chi took a step, grasping the blazing white sword with both hands. His serpentine eyes fixed on Ebizo, he leaned forward and charged. In this 360-degree infrared vision, Uchiha could sense where the wind blades would land without even looking. He twisted his step, grasped the sword, swung it, and charged. The sword light poured down, slicing arcs like moonlight. The unique Uchiha sword technique, the instantaneous slashing of the air, bloomed continuously, like a bunch of night blooming cereus blooming on the battlefield. Uchiha suddenly raised his head, revealing a ferocious face covered in black lines, and roared, "It's time to decide the winner, Ebizo." Chapter 157 The Mad Lion Forced into Despair. The blazing white sword burned with intense, concentrated fire, drawing stunning arcs, repeatedly slicing through the wind blade that was aimed at Uchiha's joints, hindering his movements. The blasting wind repeatedly inflicted wounds on his body, but that mattered little. He fixed his gaze on Ebizo, estimating the distance between them, 50 meters. If he could break through that, with the might of the blazing white sword and Uchiha's physical skills, enhanced by the Heaven's Curse seal, he was certain he could hold Ebizo off. Perhaps even defeat him. With this thought in mind, Uchiha accelerated once more, his feet digging into the ground, sending up a whirlwind of sand as he hurtled towards Ebizo like a sharp arrow. At this moment, cornered, Ebizo unleashed his full-body release technique. 3 machine maneuver, chaotic blade dance. At his command, 3 cold-faced puppets swung their long swords, charging through the air. Seeing the words Buddha, Dharma, and Monk etched on the 3 flying puppets, Uchiha's gaze narrowed. 2 of the 3 puppets raised their arms and, with a force beyond human form, spun their arms, wielding the twin swords attached to them like a windmill, slashing at them. Faced with such unforgiving swordplay, Uchiha could only evade, attempting to circumvent them with his cloud flow sword technique and destroy their arms. Just as he was about to do so, the 3rd puppet, the one behind him, suddenly raised its hands. Clack, 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 clack. The energy within its palms expanded, unleashing a swarm of kunai so dense it obscured his entire field of vision. Uchiha's gaze froze, and he instantly twisted his foot and leaped back, brushing past the blades bearing down on his face and dodging the puppet's long swords. He then doubled back, dodging the kunai's blows. This kunai, hidden within the blade's gleam, was the puppetry technique, manipulating the blade. The kunai, laced with a puppeteer's silk thread, carried immense force. A skilled puppeteer could even simultaneously attach the silk thread to the enemy upon impact, thereby controlling them. It was a truly devastating tactic. And that wasn't the end of it. After their missed strikes, the 3 puppets immediately dispersed, seemingly clearing a path. However, this was followed by a barrage of ninjutsu attacks. Wind style, high sky cannon, wind style, wind blade, wind style, Kameidachi jutsu, sand and dust billowed in the air, and Ebizo, like a pile driver, his footsteps vibrating violently as he launched ninjutsu after ninjutsu. Facing such a calculating foe, every move was a trap. Uchiha felt as if he had eaten a fly, forcing himself to keep his head down as he weaved through the sea of ninjutsu, forcing himself to close despite the injury. However, at this moment, after performing his ninjutsu, Ebizo immediately retreated, leaning against the edge of the barrier. He manipulated his 3 puppets, pressing their palms against the ground at intervals to create a secret spell. As Uchiha swung his incandescent sword, slicing through the wind blades and closing in, the secret spell on the ground quickly illuminated again. The next moment, a dense mass of bizarre puppets, resembling lion heads, were summoned from the spell 20 meters in front of Ebizo. Ebizo panted heavily, sneered, and formed hand seals. Kid, against a ninja so skilled in puppetry. This distance will be an insurmountable barrier you'll never be able to overcome. Sealing jutsu, lion's roar. The lion-headed puppets reared up, facing Uchiha, completely covering the area in front of Ebizo, forming an impenetrable puppet sealing shield. Anyone who approached would be completely sealed off from the ninja's chakra by the sealing technique contained within. This was precisely Ebizo's plan. He erected an impenetrable shield wall, preventing Uchiha, who was physically suppressing him, from getting close. Then, he would slowly manipulate his puppets to manipulate Uchiha. Having completed his attack, Ebizo glared at Uchiha with a sinister smile. This way, the brat would never be able to get close to him. Well, how will you deal with such a move? Ho ha ho ha. Facing Ebizo, who had shrunk into a turtle shell and was speaking wildly, Uchiha shook his head, waved his hand and pulled out a kunai from the ninja tool bag, threw it on the ground, raised his head, stared at the other party indifferently. Don't you understand yet? When you walk into this barrier, The two of us only one can get out alive. When Ebizo saw the special kunai stuck in the ground, and saw the 4 big words sort of ninja love written on the handle of the kunai, his pupils couldn't help but shrink. What's this? Uchiha stared at him, then suddenly laughed out loud. Old man, have you been knocked out? My mission was just to hold you here. Instead of trying to finish me off, you've erected a tombstone for yourself. Uchiha narrowed his eyes at him, then paused for a moment. Instead, he took a few steps back, a mocking smile on his face. Ha, you? Ebizo's face changed drastically. He immediately recognized the kunai as belonging to Minato Namikaze, Jiraiya's disciple, one of Konoha's 3 ninjas. As the commander-in-chief of the Tsunagakure frontline and in charge of espionage, he was familiar with Minato Namikaze's abilities. So, the sight of the kunai sent a chill through his veins. Minato Namikaze possessed the ability to carry troops across the battlefield at high speed. And when he connected the appearance of this kunai with the orange flares that had been fired into the sky, he immediately realized that Konoha's ultimate target, unbelievably him. He should have thought of this earlier. It was just that the little brat before him was too crazy, and the pressure on him was too great, so that he lost the ability to judge the entire situation for a moment. Ebizo closed his eyes in pain, gritted his teeth and let out a long breath of cold air. An inexplicable panic rose on his wrinkled face. Then, he suddenly opened a pair of old, cloudy, but sharp eyes. He stared at Uchiha, gnashing his teeth, baring his teeth, and asked in a trembling voice, "Why, you little brat, why did you do this? Don't you know that I will beat you to death? What are you thinking about, you, an Uchiha? Why do you risk your life for Konoha to this extent, madman, little brat? You are simply a lunatic." Hearing Ebizo's questioning like a desperate lion, Uchiha immediately raised his head fiercely and shouted coldly, "I knew it a long time ago. Only by devoting oneself to the flames of war, between life and death can one embark on this desperate road. So, I said it a long time ago, I tell you to beat me to death, otherwise. Wait to be beaten to death by me." The natural energy that was constantly filling up in the heavens curse seal began to be continuously released by him, surging violently in his body, and dark lines gradually crawled all over his body. At the moment when the first form of the curse seal was fully released, Uchiha raised his chin, looked at Ebizo with contempt, and shouted, "Come on, come and choose, kill me here and fight for a chance to escape with your life, or hide in your turtle shell and wait for death." It became silent in an instant. In the desert where you could hear a pin drop, Uchiha raised his hand to press his forehead, a playful and sarcastic smile on his face. His eyes passed through the gaps between his fingers and palms, looking at the pale Ebizo, and let out a wild laugh that belonged to Uchiha. It doesn't matter, there is still a lot of time for you to think. No matter what you choose, I will accompany you to the end. Chapter 158 Curse Seal 2, Mythical Snake Body. Sand drifted down from the sky, drifting to the ground. All he could hear was the whimpering wind and his own heavy breathing. Standing behind the dense lion-ceiling formation, Ebizo's eyes suddenly darkened, his old face trembling with rage as he heard Uchiha's intoxicating gestures and arrogant boasts. His teeth chattered, and he breathed in a gulp of cold air, forcing himself to calm down. The more critical the situation, the more he needed to think calmly and must not fall for the brat's provocation. In a battle between powerful warriors, the slightest mistake can mean a huge difference in outcome. As the highest-ranking commander of Tsunagakure, the brains of the entire region, he couldn't let a single word from his enemy cause him to lose his composure and make a wrong judgment. On the contrary, at this moment, Ebizo, with his age and keen sense of smell, immediately realized that the Uchiha brat before him was deceiving him. Trying to deceive him. Trying to drive him into a state of frustration, causing him to rush out of the formation and abandon the excellent fighting environment he had meticulously planned. Ebizo took another deep breath, staring at Uchiha outside the formation, narrowed his eyes and sneered, "Kid, I have to say, you're quite the talker. The information in your words is all true, but when it comes out of your mouth, it becomes a huge lie. Even this old man was almost fooled by you." Ebizo glanced sideways outside the barrier, looking at the colorful smoke drifting in the distant sky. The corners of his mouth curled up, and then he sneered and exposed, "Namikaze Minato will come, that's true. Your mission is to hold me here, that's also true. Even the fact that only one person can walk out of this barrier alive is all true. using multiple truths, seemingly reminding and mocking me kindly, but in fact you are constructing a logical trap. You keep telling me that you are in danger, that you don't have much time, and that you must rush out of the formation and kill the little kid in front of you. Only by doing this can you survive. But is that really the truth? Hey, Ebizo's eyes suddenly sharpened. He fixed Uchiha with a sullen gaze, exposing his true intentions. You cleverly concealed crucial information within the real intelligence. You didn't mention this was Tsunagakure's rear. You also didn't mention when Minato Namikaze would arrive. Perhaps it's because you didn't know, and you didn't mention that Tsunagakure's reinforcements might arrive even faster than Minato Namikaze. He glared coldly, his voice coldly stern. You're the one truly anxious to win this battle, and I, this old man, am already invincible. Ebizo's 10 fingers moved. Clack, 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 clack. 3 puppets flew around him, the dense puppet seal array before him ignited with a bright light, and the invisible, colorless, yet extremely sharp wind blade quietly gathered at his fingertips. An impenetrable shield wall, a ghostly blade poised to strike the enemy's vitals at any moment. This was Ebizo. Meticulous and calculated, a cage-level powerhouse mastering the trinity of wind release, sealing, and puppetry. As Ebizo unraveled Uchiha's deceptions one by one, Uchiha scoffed in displeasure, his deliberate arrogance fading. This veteran of a level wasn't as easily deceived as a naive youngster like Kitano Meijetsu. However, even after his deception was exposed, Uchiha's expression didn't change much. Instead, he grinned, looked at Ebizo, and conceded generously, "You're right, old man." Then, Uchiha took a deep breath, his crimson eyes narrowed, his steps hunched slightly, and he lowered his body. He raised his head and a sinister grin played. "But, I'm waiting for the peak moment, and you, what are you waiting for?" As the words fell, a surge of intense chakra suddenly erupted from Uchiha. A sudden, improvised wind whipped up a storm of sand, swirling towards the heavens. The natural energy from the Dragon Earth Cave, channeled into the Heaven's Curse Seal, transformed and energized him to its full potential after a series of transformations. The small zero tail within his abdomen also gathered enough chakra for a full burst of fire-style chakra mode. At this moment, the remaining natural energy within the Heaven's Curse Seal erupted with a bang. Dense black lines instantly covered Uchiha's body, smearing it completely black before instantly transforming from pitch black to pale white. Uchiha felt the natural energy surge frantically through his body, constantly transforming his structure. White scales continuously appeared on his body, muscle density increased dramatically, and his strength and flexibility soared. When this transformation reached its peak, it felt as if a massive snake tail would sprout from his tailbone in the next moment. Waves of piercing pain shot through his forehead. It was as if he were about to transform into Kabuto in Sage mode. However, due to the immortality's ability to lock the soul, this transforming force couldn't break through the original body's framework. Ultimately, it could only flow through the blood vessels connecting to his eyes and into his Sharingan. A pain far worse than a punctured or burned heart surged from his eye sockets. Uchiha covered his eyes, half knelt miserably on the ground, and howled in agony. A streak of purple eyeshadow slowly appeared at the corners of Uchiha's eyes, extending to the wings of his nose. This made the vertical pupils in his cursed Sharingan eyes appear even sharper and more eerie. From Ebizo's perspective, the imp not far from him saw its muscles throbbing, expanding and contracting like a constantly shifting mass of flesh. The pitch-black lines that once covered its body instantly transformed into a layer of white skin, sending chills down his spine. Although he didn't understand what was happening to the imp, the terrifying sight made him instinctively realize something was amiss. No time to wait. Use this opportunity to kill him. Ebizo's eyes sharpened, and he waved his hands, commanding the lion-headed puppets scattered across the ground to expand their arms. The massive crossbows, kunai, and long spikes hidden within their mouths were revealed. Puppetry jutsu, thousand blades volley, he roared, slamming his palm fiercely onto the ground. The next moment, nearly 1,000 hidden weapons were aimed at Uchiha, and with a whisper of the trigger, they unleashed a sudden, violent burst of fire. Swish, 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 swish. Like a torrential downpour of ninja tools, they tore through the air, creating sonic booms as they unleashed a furious barrage. Almost instantly, they traversed a 50-meter distance, transforming the kneeling Uchiha into a hedgehog. Blades pierced hearts, legs, severed hands, and broken arms, sending thudding dust billowing into the air. The young man's screams abruptly ceased. Ebizo narrowed his eyes gravely, gazing out, muttering to himself, "Is he dead? The lion puppet can fire at over 1,000 meters per second. Under such an attack, even steel would be reduced to sieves." However, when the sandstorm stirred up by the ninja tools blew away, revealing the field behind them, pierced with ninja tools, Ebizo's expression froze in astonishment. On the sand, a young man, his body pierced with the ninja tools, lay pinned to the ground like a corpse. Suddenly, a pair of scarlet, snake-like eyes opened. He twisted his head 180 degrees, grinning at Ebizo. The next moment, two hands tore open the mouth of the corpse on the ground, saliva-stained, and stretched out from it. Soon, a brand new, pale Uchiha Chi crawled out from the old Uchiha Chi's body. As he landed, the new Uchiha Chi suddenly opened his snake-like pupils, shrouded in purple shadow. A subtitle quietly appeared before his eyes: "You have mastered Heaven's Curse Seal, second form of the Curse Seal, mythical serpent body, A+. In this state, you have mastered the principles of the snake-shutting technique without a teacher. Your snake-shutting technique has been upgraded to Great Snake Style, Substitution Technique, A+. Your Sharingan has been invaded by natural energy, undergoing subtle changes. You seem to have awakened a Celestial Eye Technique." Chapter 159, Immortal Magic Inorganic Reincarnation, The Unrestrained Snake. Slurp. Feeling this perfectly formed, cursive form, this power, I feel like I could kill 10 cows right now. Uchiha Chi took a deep breath, exhaling a long, condensed stream of white air into the night. A flicker of excitement flickered in his eyes, and he couldn't help but lick his lips. The power of the Dragon Earth Cave wasn't so easy to harness. The massive influx of natural energy had nearly burst his eyes. If Ebizo hadn't suddenly intervened, draining him of a wave of chakra and forcibly draining some of the natural energy with a forbidden technique, flesh transformation, he would have been nearly blinded. Then, in return, Uchiha Chi grinned, a grim smile spreading across his pale face. "I'll let you witness the power of an immortal." Instantly, his serpentine pupils twisted slightly, glancing at Ebizo, whose face was filled with astonishment behind the ceiling formation. A sudden burst of murderous intent flashed in his eyes. The next moment, Uchiha Chi's footsteps cracked the ground, and a violent surge of chakra surged through his body. In an instant, he broke the sound barrier, sending a gust of wind blasting from his position before vanishing on the spot. He plunged headfirst into the ceiling formation formed by the lion puppets. "This brat is even faster than before." "Bad," Ebizo's eyes flashed with astonishment, and he gritted his teeth. Facing an opponent so fast that conventional methods could not hide him, he had to leave him nowhere to hide. With this thought in mind, Ebizo immediately clasped his hands together and slammed the ground fiercely, pouring chakra into the ceiling formation before him. Puppet Jutsu, Lion Binding Rabbit. The secret code of the technique suddenly illuminated, and the lion-headed puppets flew high into the sky, erecting a shield wall, and unleashed a rain of ninja tools and ropes at Uchiha Chi. Swish, 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 swish. Facing the raging rain of blades, Uchiha Chi's lips curled in disdain. As he charged, he clasped his hands together and shouted angrily, "You think you can kill me? Ridiculous. Let me tell you, I am an immortal." He stomped his foot forward, his feet blasting the heavens. With perfect control of his body and a superhuman intuition for combat, he skipped the countless tedious steps of cultivating the celestial arts on Mount Myaboku. The natural energy within his body combined with his own physical and mental energies, instantly distributing the three energies in a balanced 1:1 ratio, merging into new force. Senjutsu Chakra. This chakra flowed through his feet, blasting into the ground, causing the entire desert surface within the barrier to tremble. The next moment, the celestial art that Orochimaru had copied with his Sharingan reappeared. Senjutsu, Inorganic Reincarnation. The sand beneath his feet surged, lifting Uchiha Chi high and whipping a gust of wind from his face. Finally, the vast mass of sand transformed beneath his feet into a giant snake. Hiss! The serpent raised its head and roared furiously toward the heavens, shaking the entire barrier twice. Then, Uchiha Chi stood atop the serpent, carried by it, slamming headfirst into the murderous rain of cold blades, and then into the terrifying shield wall behind it. Has this brat lost his mind? Ebizo's face trembled. His scalp tingled as he watched Uchiha Chi's unwavering, utterly suicidal act. He quickly gritted his teeth, raised his palm, and formed the way seal, his eyes glaring. "Alright, if that's the case, Then I'll grant your wish. The next moment, he barked coldly, puppetry technique, blade control, human body manipulation, sealing technique, lion's roar. The chakra threads hidden within the rain of cold blades detached from their ninja tools, revealing their pointed tips. They shot out with a rain of cold blades. Then, the lion puppets forming the shield wall opened their maws, drawing a hurricane of wind, sucking them back in. Faced with such an unavoidable attack, Uchiha Chi made no move. He allowed the chakra threads of the blade control and the other ninja tools to pierce his body, dragging him towards the shield wall. Then, sucked into the lion puppet's mouth by the gust of wind, he bit down. Crack! As the sharp teeth pierced Uchiha Chi's body, black lines of sealing appeared on his body, completely locking away his chakra. At the same time, the giant sand snake created by the inorganic reincarnation slammed into the shield wall, forcibly smashing a huge hole in the entire shield formation. Success! Ebizo raised his eyebrows, his eyes brightening. Normally, once the chakra is sealed, a ninja is no different from an ordinary person. However, the next moment, a sudden roar echoed from the lion-headed puppet containing Uchiha Chi. Bang! A violent airflow carried countless wooden and iron puppet fragments backward. A fist covered with white snake scales smashed through the puppet, then forcibly broke it in two. Uchiha Chi, his body covered with the black lines of sealing jutsu and pierced by various ninja tools like a hedgehog, suddenly leaped out. How is this possible? Ebizo's eyes suddenly widened, staring in disbelief at the young man who had forcibly dismantled his puppet with his physical strength alone. The seals on his body proved his chakra was indeed sealed. But what was going on now? Uchiha Chi sneered, and after landing, he continued to run towards Ebizo without stopping. He opened his mouth wide as he charged, and a new arm suddenly stretched out from it. Just like that, as the old body charged frantically, the new Uchiha Chi tore open its mouth and climbed out. The scene was eerie and terrifying. He slithered beneath a rain of cold blades, leaping across the battle formation. At this moment, Uchiha Chi was like the mythical snake that never died, endlessly repeating itself, the unrestrained snake. Uchiha Chi was indeed sealed, but Ebizo had only sealed his snake skin, which was generated by the second form of the heavenly curse seal. The great snake-style substitution technique, the most flawed substitution technique in the entire ninja world, once mastered, would dissolve many common ninja rules. This was a miracle of ninjutsu. Damn it, what the hell is this? Ebizo's scalp tingled, but he saw Uchiha Chi about to rush through the gap pierced by the giant sand snake. If he let this brat get close, and then let the Sand Village boxing champion take a set of Uchiha boxing techniques, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. Ebizo immediately gritted his teeth again, raised his palm to control the puppet, and wanted to shoot out another torrential rain of ninja tools, blocking Uchiha Chi's way and movement. At that moment, Uchiha Chi was crouching over the face of the sprinting snake-skinned Uchiha Chi, pulling out his last leg. Seeing this, he couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Old man, you're trying to make amends now. He threw his head back and grinned, laughing loudly. Ho 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 ho. Then, abruptly stopping his laughter, his expression changed, and he looked at Ebizo with an expressionless face. He coldly pronounced, "Let me be merciful and tell you, old man, now, it's too late." With that, Uchiha Chi leaped from his old snake form to the ground. He reached back into the mouth of snake-skinned Uchiha Chi and drew his Kusanagi sword. The next moment, he bared his gleaming white teeth at Ebizo, grasped the hilt with his backhand, and swung. Trigger the heart. Zero Tail is unleashed. The forbidden technique is activated. In an instant, in the endless desert of the Kingdom of Wind, under the night sky, a bright sun suddenly rose. Chapter 160 The Fourth Sword, The Decisive Battle. Ebizo had intended to use the Buddha, Dharma, and monk puppets to advance and use the puppetry technique, blade attack to strike Uchiha Chi once more. However, when he saw the sun rising slowly in the desert, when he saw the huge, flaming sword held high, reaching heaven and earth, a visually stunning sight, Ebizo swallowed, his movements abruptly halted in disbelief. What the hell is this? How could he even use such a move? Tonight, this Uchiha brat had shocked him so much that he questioned his life. According to the intelligence he had gathered in the land of hot water, the move Uchiha Chi was currently using was undoubtedly a forbidden technique that surpassed the level limit of ninjutsu. Moreover, He should only be able to use it twice at most. Combined with the fact that he had his Tsunagakure subordinates poring over the databases of the major bloodline secret technique families day and night, he had a rough idea of how this move was unleashed. Uchiha style, Sun Halo Dance. This technique, which appeared in the Warring States period, even more distant than the Ninja Village era, could incinerate a mortal's body, unleashing a sword power comparable to that of a god. At this moment, the power in Uchiha Chi's hand was significantly weaker than the one described in the documentation, which might be why he was able to use this technique twice in succession in the land of hot water. However, even if it was a weakened version, how many times had this brat used it tonight? Before this, when the two were 10 miles apart, the sky had flashed red 3 times in quick succession, proving that this brat had wielded 3 swords. With 3 strikes, not a single ray of light emerged from the 300 Sands village troops who were supposed to report. And now, this was the 4th strike. Could it be that this inhuman technique had no cooldown at all, no price to pay? Are there still laws? Are there still rules? Gazing at the flaming giant sword, Ebizo gritted his teeth. After a moment's hesitation, he immediately withdrew his grip and, pulling the Buddha, Dharma, and monk puppets to the side, fled. As he trotted, he formed the way seal, controlling the dense swarm of lion puppets to attack. It wasn't that he couldn't withstand such a move, the ultimate killing moves of wind style and puppetry could unleash even greater power. It was simply that this sword was clearly aimed at breaking the formation. He didn't need to take it head-on and exhaust his last means of defense. A detour in temporary retreat was the wiser move at this moment. He also didn't believe this brat could swing a 5th sword. As Ebizo abandoned his advantageous position, he opted to use the sealing formation to trade blows. Standing in the midst of the sun, the young man, holding aloft the slowly forming, sky-piercing flaming giant sword, suddenly smiled. Yes, Uchiha Chi smiled. I win, he declared with such conviction. Uchiha Chi's lip curled up as he gazed at the fleeing Ebizo with blazing eyes. With his current chakra reserves, he could probably use 4 Orochi Ryu substitution jutsu, 2 senjutsu, 1 full blast fire style chakra mode, and several ninjutsu and genjutsu, 1 Orochi Ryu substitution jutsu. For Uchiha Chi at this point, was equivalent to the chakra equivalent of 4 great fireballs. The maximum he could use depended on how many Orochi Ryu substitution jutsu he had remaining, if Ebizo remained and chose to engage him in a head-on confrontation. Preventing the flowing flame giant sword from breaking through the formation, then Uchiha Chi would have no choice but to use the Orochi Ryu substitution jutsu to forcibly charge the formation. A conservative estimate would exhaust all his substitution charges. Even if he managed to reach Ebizo, he would likely have few remaining tactics, rather than engaging in hand-to-hand combat. Based on his model, based on Ebizo's sister Chiyo, Ebizo still had 2 tricks up his sleeve. The outcome was uncertain. But Uchiha Chi chose to take the gamble anyway. He was betting that his special effects surpassed Ebizo's. He was betting that even if Ebizo had intel on him, when the other side truly saw this flowing flame greatsword, its special effects blasting out like divine might, he would be terrified. Win the bet, and he'd win the battle. Lose the bet, and at worst, he'd die. In this long night of surprise attacks, this 4th strike would decide the outcome, the key to victory. And now, Ebizo had given up his shell, frightened away by this powerful swordsmanship. Ho ha ho 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 ha ho ha, old man, take one of my sure-win ascending dragon swords. Uchiha laughed heartily, raising the flowing flame greatsword high and twisting the hilt. Blazing flames pierced the air, accompanied by the mighty sword as it slashed down with unbridled force. Boom! The sword swept across, setting off a wildfire that ignited the heavens, crushing, scorching, and shattering the seemingly impenetrable lion shield formation before it. A mushroom cloud suddenly rose in the desert. A wave of wind, visible to the naked eye, erupted in a circular pattern, sending Ebizo and Uchiha Chi flying high. It soared outwards, shattering 3 sand dunes and stirring up a hail of sand. Finally, it crashed into the regeneration barrier, creating a dense chasm of cracks. Between heaven and earth, only an indescribable, horrified silence remained. Amidst this silence, amidst the soundless rain of falling sand, Uchiha Chi casually wiped the blood from his ruptured eardrums mid-air. He swung out 2 shurikens, piercing them into the sand. Pulling on the silk threads, he spun 720 degrees and landed steadily. He plunged his palms into the sand, creating a gully and halting his charge. Then, he immediately raised his snake-eyed Sharingan and locked onto Ebizo, who was hiding behind a nearby puppetry shield. He twisted his foot, crushing the sand. He ducked, sword in hand, charging like a feral dog. Old man, die! Ebizo was still reeling from the shock of his previous strike. Even after running a great distance, he couldn't avoid the aftermath. In desperation, he could only use his puppet technique, mechanical light shield, to block it. At that moment, hearing the Uchiha brats groaning again, his eyelids and eyebrows twitched. He lifted his cloudy, aged eyes to see the rabid youth charging at him. This time, there was no resistance. His scalp tingled, and a wave of surprise and fear rose in his eyes. Then, that fear gave way to rage. Ebizo, a leader of one of the 5 most powerful ninja villages, the supreme commander of the Tsunagakure forces in the Land of Rain, had been forced into such a desperate situation by a 12-year-old brat, forced to flee. This was utter humiliation. But, he had to endure the humiliation. Close combat wasn't his forte, he couldn't just use short blades to defeat long ones. He had to run. Yes, run. Gain distance, rearrange his position, gain the upper hand. And slowly finish this brat off. With this thought in mind, Ebizo unleashed the puppetry technique, mechanical light shield, and immediately, commanding his 3 puppets, broke into a furious gallop. However, Uchiha Chi, empowered by the heavenly curse seal, was now completely outpacing Ebizo. Ebizo had no chance of winning. In this true battle of true men, he had to unleash all his might and engage Uchiha Chi in a real fight. Soon, a slow trot was no match for a long run, and Ebizo realized this. He turned abruptly, revealing a face twisted with shame, anger, and rage, a face that had been cornered, its underwear torn apart by force. Ebizo, looking at Uchiha Chi, who was extremely excited and rushed towards him with a fierce fighting spirit and a ferocious look on his face, Ebizo's face was distorted and full of ferocity. The humiliation and anger in his heart finally broke out at this moment. His body was shaking, his face was shaking, his teeth were trembling, and finally, he took out the scroll from his waist and shouted angrily, "Damn Uchiha brat, I will let you see the pinnacle of puppetry, summoning technique, the Kinmatsu 5, he tore the scroll into pieces, slammed the ground with one palm, and then stepped out in the smoke of summoning technique. Behind him, 5 demon-like figures flew up, and 6 figures leaped high and flew out, accompanied by Ebizo's furious roar, forbidden technique, white secret technique, dance of puppetry. Chapter 161 Mile 8? A full moon hung high in the sky, and the wind and sand blew like rain. Above the boundless desert, within a towering, pale crimson barrier, illuminated by the merciless moonlight, Ebizo strode out through the white smoke, his hands already grasping 2 wind-style, vacuum blades. The blades clashed. Clang. Ebizo's true form firmly blocked Uchiha Chi's incoming Kusanagi sword. Immediately, from behind him, 5 puppets leaped forward, brandishing 3 long swords and 2 wildly spinning 4-bladed chakra blades, thrusting towards Uchiha Chi's face. Facing this onslaught, Uchiha Chi's eyes focused, and he kicked Ebizo away. Turning back, he swung his Kusanagi sword, constantly parrying the puppet's attacks, dodging the flashes of sword light with ease. Suddenly, his sword swung in a circle, a line as bright as moonlight, slicing 2 puppets away. Uchiha Chi immediately forced his way through the gap in the 5-puppet formation and slashed down at Ebizo with a fierce, powerful blow. At this moment, Ebizo seized this brief opportunity and summoned a white-robed female puppet wielding 2 broadswords, replacing the slashed red and white puppets. With a flick of his finger, the white-robed female puppet's broadsword components flew out, attaching themselves to Ebizo's sturdy arms. Human puppet technique, mechanical light twin blades. Then, Ebizo swung the 2 broadswords, slashing at Uchiha Chi. With such force and power, Uchiha Chi felt a numbness in his palms, nearly losing his grip on the Kusanagi sword. The ends of Ebizo's twin swords erupted in blue flames. With a single sweep, he sent Uchiha Chi careening towards him, slashing backward with momentum. The remaining puppets seized the opportunity, ready to strike back. 3 of them leaped forward, their blades thrust towards Uchiha Chi's back as he adjusted himself and landed. A chill ran down Uchiha Chi's spine, and he instinctively rolled over, dodging the 3 puppets' thrusts. Just as he raised his head to scramble, Ebizo leaped forward, wielding 2 enormous swords. Forced to form the Chen seal with one hand, he forcibly unleashed the wind-style, fierce wind palm, sending him flying. He then stumbled back and landed. Uchiha Chi was stunned. His crimson, snake-like eyes narrowed slightly, scanning Ebizo and his 6 puppets, who were breathing heavily and looking pained. Of course, he recognized these puppets. They were the second Kazukage's signature technique, the White Secret Technique, the 10 of the Kenmatsu. They included a female puppet wielding 2 slashing swords, a blue-faced puppet dancing with a pointed rope, 2 red-faced and white-faced puppets that could combine to form a high-speed, 4-edged chakra blade, 3 Buddha monk puppets, a white-haired puppet capable of extending its arms to fire spikes and bombs, and a bull-headed puppet responsible for close combat and protection. Unlike Chiyo, who could perfectly control 10 puppets, creating suffocating attacks and impenetrable defenses, possessing both offensive and defensive capabilities and excelling in medical ninjutsu, Ebizo seemed to be able to control only 5, and even then, was unable to fully unleash the power of the 10 of the Kenmatsu. However, the forbidden technique he employed, the Bamkyumi no Dan, was another form of puppetry, imbuing himself with the puppet's abilities, transforming himself into a 6th puppet, a human puppet. The 6 puppets dancing together greatly enhanced his opponent's melee capabilities. And it seemed there was more. In the blink of an eye, Ebizo summoned the remaining 10 members of the Chikamatsu clan one by one. Then, puppet components flew out, piercing the old man's body, sending streams of blood splattering. They combined into a towering puppet body. A cleaving sword clung to its left arm, while a rapidly spinning 4-edged chakra blade sprouted from its right. A wall on its chest and abdomen held various hidden compartments capable of activating ropes and hidden weapons, as well as on its back and legs. Uchiha Chi had a vision of Iron Man transforming. When the dust settled, Ebizo, covered in blood and almost completely transformed into a human puppet, suddenly raised his head. With a face filled with pain and ferocity, he stared at Uchiha Chi, vomiting a large mouthful of blood and revealing a sinister smile. "Kid, you think you're a good fighter, come on, today, I will personally send you to see Uchiha Madara." The moment he finished speaking, blue flames erupted from behind Ebizo, and the intense push from his back propelled him forward. Then, a punch, carrying a storm of wind, came crashing down. The 4-bladed chakra blade on his right arm spun wildly, drilling towards Uchiha Chi's face. Uchiha Chi's scarlet snake eyes shrank sharply. At such a speed, he only had time to raise the Kusanagi sword to block. Sizzle. The 4-bladed chakra blade continuously drilled sparks from the Kusanagi sword. Ebizo swung his left hand fiercely, his slashing blade seizing the opportunity. He pierced Uchiha Chi's abdomen with a single blow, lifted him high, and swung it forward. Then, the 10 fingers of his puppet hands flicked up, and he shouted fiercely, "Puppet Jutsu, 3 treasures absorption." The 3 puppets of Buddha, Dharma, and Monk had already leaped behind Uchiha Chi. Standing in a triangle, they formed the Yin seal and activated the mechanism. Instantly, a terrifying storm erupted from the ground, forming a fierce tornado that swept Uchiha Chi inside. Uchiha Chi, suspended in midair, his stomach pierced through with a vast hole, fell to shock as he was pulled backwards into the center of the 3 treasures absorption array. The 3 treasures absorption array worked like a wall-breaking machine, completely compressing the absorbed matter at the center of the array before ejecting it from the rear, completely shattering it. If you were to be struck by this attack, even with the Orochi Ryu substitution jutsu, he would have no chance of survival. Uchiha Chi's scalp tingled. He immediately turned his back and channeled his chakra into the Kusanagi sword. He formed the C seal with his left hand and the Chen seal with his right. He opened his mouth and exhaled, attaching the air mass of the wind style, vacuum blade to the water style, water fang blade, completing the combined ninjutsu, hurricane water vortex sword. A blue line, rising from the sword's tip, instantly pierced the core of the formation, which had been absorbed by the 3 treasures. The reverse blades gusts of wind and the shattered water blades exploded in an instant, abruptly blocking the core of the formation. The wind died, and Uchiha Chi was about to leap to the ground. However, at that moment, Ebizo suddenly soared in front of him. With a fierce swing of his arm, his left hand pierced Uchiha Chi's neck with a single blow, his palm tightly gripping his neck. The old man, with a ferocious look on his face, forcibly pushed him forward, carrying Uchiha Chi with him towards the center of the formation where the puppetry technique, 3 treasures absorption, which had crushed the hurricane water vortex sword, erupted again. "Old man, what the hell are you doing?" Uchiha Chi raised his head with difficulty, staring at Ebizo in horror. Wasn't this old man planning to escape? Now, he actually wanted to take him with him? This series of events caught Uchiha Chi completely off guard. He had never expected Ebizo's final trump card to be the transformation of himself into a human puppet, embodying such a powerful attack. Uchiha Chi was confident he could handle such a move. After all, Ebizo didn't have the Sharingan. Just as Kakashi couldn't control a Raikiri without the Sharingan, Ebizo, in his puppet form, couldn't control his swiftness either. In this state, as long as Uchiha Chi avoided being hit by the three treasures absorption, victory was assured. However, Uchiha Chi hadn't expected this cowardly old man to choose such a brutal fight, actually wanting to die with him. Hey, while madly rushing towards the center of the formation, Ebizo couldn't help but glance in one direction, a hint of deep fear in his eyes. There, a yellow-haired young man wearing a Konoha genin vest suddenly appeared, half crouching, one hand half gripping the handle of a kunai stuck in the ground. It was this person's appearance that immediately changed Ebizo's mind and led him to such a mad move. He turned around, the veins bulging from the hand gripping Uchiha Chi's neck as he glared at him with a twisted expression. "Shut up, you bastard, if it weren't for you, if it weren't for you, if it weren't for you." Ebizo's wrinkled face trembled wildly as he roared, "How could I have ended up like this? Now, I'll do as you wish, let's die together." A secret compartment in Ebizo's chest suddenly opened, and with a flick of his left hand, a puff of purple smoke suddenly erupted. Puppetry technique, poison mist spray. Uchiha Chi, sprayed in the face, suddenly widened his eyes. He felt his entire body suddenly lose control. He tried to raise his arms to struggle, but it was his legs that moved. Even with his combat instincts, facing this potent neurotoxin, he needed time to adjust before he could move. But at this moment, Ebizo wanted this moment of immobility. He wanted to take Uchiha Chi with him to the afterlife. With this thought, Ebizo thrust one arm into Uchiha Chi's neck, leaped high, and threw himself into the center of the formation. He couldn't help but raise a fierce arc at the corner of his mouth. "Uchiha Chi, you are too dangerous for Sand Village. Even if I die, I will eliminate this scourge of yours." However, at such a critical moment, so fast that the naked eye could not see clearly, so that only a flash of yellow could be seen, a young man wearing a Konoha genin vest and with brilliant yellow hair suddenly appeared in front of the two of them. He smiled at Uchiha Chi, then raised his hand slightly, and the secret pattern of the four-symbol sealing technique instantly unfolded in his palm. The wind suddenly died down. Uchiha Chi raised his head and heard a clear and gentle voice, "Am I too late?" Chapter 162, Fury Minato. Combo skills, Flash, Super Wheel Dance, Roar, Undead Triple Blade Slash. Am I late? At this moment, facing imminent demise alongside Ebizo, such a sudden greeting would have been mistaken for a mockery by anyone unfamiliar with the situation. Fortunately, Uchiha Chi knew the character of the little son, Minato Namikaze, and was about to chime in, "No, you're just in time." However, due to the neurotoxin carefully crafted by Chiyo, Uchiha Chi was unable to utter a single word. Instead, the poisoning left him unable to control his facial muscles, and his throat was slashed by Ebizo. In the end, he merely opened his mouth, but no sound emanated. At that moment, Minato Namikaze, rushing to his aid, looked up and saw this scene, a pale-faced youth staring blankly at him. Then, he suddenly vomited a mouthful of blood, his mouth gaping like a drowning fish, his breathing rapid, as if he were about to speak, but his severe injuries meant more outgoing air than incoming. A gaping hole pierced his stomach, revealing the organs within. Amidst the cleavage, Ebizo's left arm, a massive sword stabbed through his neck, a garbled stream of blood spurting down the blade. It was as if half his head had been chopped off. A normal ninja would be unable to continue fighting even with just one of these injuries, yet this young man, desperate to buy him time, risked his life. At that moment, the boy's blood splattered onto Minato Namikaze's face as he dove in front of him. Minato's face was filled with astonishment, his voice lost in shock. Then, his expression quickly shifted to pity, grief, and heaviness. "Am I too late again?" Minato clenched his fists in agony. The full moon in the night sky illuminated his face, half shrouded in darkness and stained with his companion's blood. It felt as if a ferocious beast was tearing his heart apart. Finally, he raised his head and stared intently at Ebizo, the instigator of all this. His azure eyes, the color of the sky, suddenly erupted with uncontrollable fury. And at that moment, Ebizo, standing across from Minato, truly felt like cursing. His scalp tingled as he stared at the yellow-haired youth blocking his way, his heart trembling. He felt a pang of pain that Minato, whom he had just met, had suddenly harbored such intense murderous intent towards him. Minato didn't know, but he knew that the Uchiha brat he had stabbed half to death might appear seriously injured, but if he gave it a chance to breathe, a whole new one would crawl out of its mouth in no time. This Uchiha brat alone had nearly cornered him, and now, along came another, a Namikaze Minato whose speed was too great for him to handle. For a moment, Ibizo imagined seeing the long-deceased bald-headed Kazekage of the second generation standing in the night sky, smiling and waving at him. Damn it, I can't die here, Ibizo gritted his teeth, a plan suddenly forming in his mind. He sneered at Minato before him. Namikaze Minato? That brat's still alive. If you want to save him, then, midway through his words, Ibizo suddenly released his grip on Uchiha Chi and swung his sword. With a single strike, he flung Uchiha Chi away like a tattered sack. Then, he raised his hands towards Minato and Uchiha Chi before him. Secret compartments in his chest and palms opened, unleashing a dense barrage of poisonous sunburn. A burst of blue flame erupted from the puppet jets behind him, and the intense thrust from his back sent Ibizo flying a great distance. As soon as he landed, the old man immediately assumed the stance of a marathon runner and sprinted without turning back. Threat, sneak attack, escape. Ibizo's movements were incredibly smooth, instantly turning the tide and buying him a moment. Meanwhile, 1,000 kimonos were about to descend, enveloping Minato and the mid-air Uchiha Chi. Namikaze Minato's pupils shrank, and with a touch of his toes, he vanished instantly. Reappearing mid-air, he had grasped half of Uchiha Chi's shoulder, carrying him back to the initial flying thunder god mark within the barrier. Silently, he supported the breathless, nearly dying Uchiha Chi, laying him flat on the ground. A look of deep regret filled his eyes. I'm sorry, Uchiha Chi, I'm too late. Even though Namikaze Minato had rushed to his aid the moment he saw the signal flare, using the flying thunder god Kune wielded by the flare launchers without a moment's delay, upon seeing the half-dead Uchiha Chi, he still felt a sense of responsibility. Minato exhaled heavily, clenched his fists and promised Uchiha Chi, I'll be back soon. He looked up at Ibizo who was rushing towards the edge of the cracked pale red barrier, his eyes fixed. Is his goal to break this barrier and leave? It seems that I have been lured away from the mountain. Minato frowned and looked at him, his eyes immediately determined. He looked back at Uchiha Chi who was lying on the ground with a pale face, like a candle in the wind, tied his hands to the gleaming Konoha forehead protector on his forehead, twisted his feet on the ground, stepped on the vast desert of the wind country, and the end of the ribbon rustled in the night wind, carrying the wishes of my companions, protecting the family in the village, and defeating the powerful enemy. This is my duty now. Namikaze Minato took a deep breath, anger burning in his blue eyes, staring at Ibizo who was rushing like a bulldozer in the distance, and said in a deep voice, we can't let him act recklessly anymore. After that, Minato was about to swiftly leap after him, but just then, a trembling hand suddenly grasped his trouser leg. Huh? Minato froze, looking down. The next moment, he saw Uchiha Chi, his neck and face covered in blood, his face pale and pale, raising his hand. He opened his palm towards him, as if demanding something. Kyukume, he uttered, struggling to control his severed throat. At this point, Minato was still too young to master the Rasengan. Uchiha Chi believed Minato could defeat Ibizo, but his current offensive power was still somewhat limited to kill Ibizo, who had transformed him into a human puppet. Especially as Ibizo flung him away, Uchiha Chi used his Sharingan to spot an uninvited visitor approaching from afar. Beyond the barrier, in the desert at the end of his sight, a man with short brown hair and a black ninja uniform was rushing towards him through the wind and sand. This man was none other than the fourth Kazekage, Raza, Konoha's assassination target. You still want to fight? Minato's face was instantly filled with emotion, and he stared in shock at the now half-dead Uchiha Chi. Uchiha Chi didn't speak, and in fact, he couldn't speak anymore. His throat was completely severed at this point, and he could only look at Minato with a determined gaze. Minato was silent for a moment, thinking this was Uchiha Chi's dying wish. He thought for a moment, and finally nodded, reaching into his bag of ninja tools and pulling out a special kunai. He squatted down, and with trembling hands, he took Uchiha Chi's hand and solemnly placed the kunai into his hand. Then, Minato said in a deep voice, then please come and protect my back, Uchiha Chi. This is our common battle. In that case, I will name this move, combination technique, flashing super wheel dance roar farewell slash. After saying this, Namikaze Minato's eyes trembled slightly, unable to bear to look directly at it. He immediately turned his head and shouted in a deep voice, "Are you ready? Let's go." The next moment, Minato loosened his palm and flew out in an instant, turning into a yellow flash that was difficult to see with the naked eye. At a speed faster than the tail flame push of Ebizo's puppet body, he stirred up a cloud of sand and rushed towards the other party. The distance between the two sides was rapidly shortened in just a moment. At this moment, just behind Minato, Uchiha Chi finally regained control of his body under the influence of the neurotoxin. His current state resembled that of Uchiha Shinichi's Genjutsu, requiring him to use his hands as feet and his feet as his head. Fortunately, this wasn't a difficult task for Uchiha Chi. Readjusting his body, he immediately manipulated his body and opened his mouth violently. A pale arm swiftly emerged from the mouth, tearing the body apart. A completely new, intact young man crawled out. Half his body was stuck in the mouth, and Uchiha Chi looked at Namake's Minato, who had rushed forward without a glance, with a frown on his face. He cursed, "What a lousy name," flashing super round dance roar farewell slash. He shook his head, snatched up the special kunai in the hand of snake-skinned Uchiha Chi, and pulled out the flying thunder god kunai that had been planted there as a marker from the sand. One hand spread its fingers, grasping two kunai, while the other drew the Kusanagi sword. His scarlet snake eyes narrowed as he looked at the fleeing Ebizo. Uchiha Chi grinned and strode forward. Wrong, this move should be called combination technique, flashing super wheel dance roar undead 3-edge slash. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163 Luoshia's Choice, Ebizo's Death. At this moment, in the desert near the edge of the barrier. It feels so quiet. Has Minato Namake's not caught up? And what about that Uchiha brat, gazing at the boundless desert, silent, with only the howling of wind and sand? Ebizo's heart sank. But he quickly cast aside these distracting thoughts, squinting his eyes at the cracked, pale crimson barrier. Blasted by the aftermath of Uchiha Chi's fire-release chakra mode, the barrier was already shaky and no longer as solid as before, which made Ebizo happy. Almost there, this barrier can't stop me anymore. All my desperate battles have paid off. Ebizo strode forward, glancing beyond the barrier. At the end of his sight, the Tsunagakure reinforcements were rushing in both directions. The fourth Kazakage of the Tsunagakure village, Raza, who had come to rescue him. He had originally thought that this young man, obsessed with power struggles, lacked the awareness and was incapable of supporting the future of the Sand Village. He had long been opposed to Raza becoming Kazakage. Now, it seemed, he had been too harsh on the young man. Look, as Kazakage, Raza, wasn't he quite credible? But why was he here? Never mind, it doesn't matter anymore. Ebizo shook his head, his puppet armor erupting in flames as he stared intently ahead with longing. Almost, as long as we get there, from now on, as long as we, the Sand Village, unite and work together, as long as we don't stop, the road will continue to expand. But then, a sudden sound like brakes rang out beside him. Ebizo started, looked up, and saw that the sound had come from outside the barrier. At that moment, the fourth Kazakage, Raza, was running in that direction. He also saw Ebizo, trapped in alone within the barrier. But the moment he saw Ebizo, Raza slammed his heel on the brakes, stopping abruptly, a look of astonishment on his face. What the hell? Why was that old man Ebizo here? Why was this stubborn old man on the route he had secretly designed to reach the front lines? And with his bruised face, he looked like he'd been beaten to death. Raza's heart leaped, and he immediately realized that this was a crucial moment for him. This position, this opportunity, with his gold burial ability, he could instantly gather gold dust from a half-kilometer radius and shatter the barrier to rescue Ebizo. But he had already sacrificed so much and shouldered so much to become Kazakage. Yet, his will was never truly carried out in the village. Ebizo and Chiyo, those two old men, along with a host of high-ranking officials, controlled the Tsunagakure military and political affairs, leaving him as Kazakage in name only, even risking his life to take on this empty position. Was this what he wanted? Saving Ebizo now might change the old man's opinion of him, gain his support, and secure his position as Kazakage. Or perhaps... Raza's eyes suddenly hardened, and he stood expressionless, watching Ebizo, who rushed toward him with an eager look on his face. His face, half hidden in the moonlight, was shrouded in a gloomy, dark expression. And then, the next moment, a flash of yellow suddenly erupted from behind Ebizo. A young man in the guise of a Konoha genin appeared behind Ebizo in a flash of lightning, stabbing him in the throat with a kunai in his backhand. A clear, furious roar echoed, "Ebizo, carrying the wishes of my comrades and the mission of the village, I cannot lose." This is the combination technique, flash, super round dance, roar, and farewell slash. Ebizo suddenly raised his head, his expression grim, and his angry roar practically resonated across the desert. How is this possible? How could this old man be defeated just like this? Within the barrier, Ebizo roared, turning and gazing at Minato, who was leaping towards him at a speed so fast it was suffocating him. His scalp tingled. Such speed was simply beyond the reach of a human. Facing Uchiha Chi's speed was already enough to give Ebizo a headache. He even deployed all of his lion puppets and unleashed most of his ninja tools, aiming to force the enemy back with a barrage of fire. Now, he couldn't use the same moves at the same scale as before. Even if he could, he wouldn't be able to stop Minato Namikaze, who is even faster than Uchiha Chi. So, he could only. Since I can't match your speed as a human, then, I will cease to be a human. Ebizo's eyes glared, bloodshot, streaks of blood in the whites of his eyes, making his blood-soaked face look like a demon. He suddenly raised his palm, thrust his fingers into his chest, and channeled chakra into his body. Practice, human body puppetry. This was the ultimate in human puppetry, allowing one to manipulate oneself like a puppet. This allowed him to gain power beyond human limits. Instantly, Ebizo's stiff movements shifted, becoming incredibly smooth. He pressed his hand against the ground, and with wind-style, fierce wind palm, a sudden burst of wind erupted, propelling him high into the air, avoiding Minato Namikaze's inevitable attack. After a few awkward tumbles, he crashed to the ground. A pair of puppet eyes flew out from the mecha behind him, suddenly piercing his eye sockets and popping them. Tears of blood streamed down his wrinkled cheeks. Then, the puppet eyes fluttered up and down, locking onto Minato. "Look! I can see your movements perfectly now, Namikaze Minato." Ebizo let out a sinister grin. "Using this human puppetry technique, I'm doomed. You win, Konoha wins, but you damn brats, I'll make you the future of Tsunagakure." Namikaze Minato said nothing, simply looking at Ebizo calmly. Suddenly, with a flick of his right hand, he hurled 4 flying thunder god kunai. Then, in a flash of yellow light, he charged at Ebizo with terrifying force. He couldn't confirm whether Ebizo was bluffing, so he had to make sure he got Ebizo's head before he'd rest. Flying thunder god slash? Haha, I've seen it before. If your kunai can't reach me, how can you possibly defeat me? Ebizo sneered, ejected a scroll from his gauntlet, raised his hand, pressed it, formed a seal, and blew it backward. Scroll, flame prison shock array, wind style, wind cutting technique, combined ninjutsu, flame wind shock array. A fierce flame erupted, instantly creating a sea of inferno so vast that no human could stand. 4 wind blades, like flaming arrows, shot out, deflecting 4 flying thunder god kunai and transforming Minato's footing into a pool of flame. Minato frowned slightly, ducking back to avoid the flames. Then, in a flash, he darted out, weaving through the gaps in the flames and skirting to the side. He flung a kunai out of Ebizo's sight, then flew in, piercing the back of Ebizo's neck. Ebizo was startled. So fast, luckily, he was no longer human. He ducked his head, and the puppet cell on his back opened, spraying a barrage of poisonous needles at Minato. The next moment, Minato returned to his original position, frowning. He currently lacked the ability to crush his enemy's defenses with a single swift strike and inflict heavy damage. He could only continue to waste time, launching repeated assassinations. He knew he would eventually win if he dragged it out. But now, behind the Tsunagakure, he was acutely aware of the 4th Kazekage, Raza, approaching from beyond the barrier, who had for some unknown reason stopped. Time was running out. Should I summon Master Bunta for help? Or perhaps force my way through the seal? Minato frowned, his hands already forming hand seals before he could even think. He must at least leave the mark of the Flying Thunder God technique on the opponent, allowing him countless opportunities for trial and error. However, at that moment, a figure suddenly brushed past Minato and leaped into the sea of fire. It was Uchiha Chi. He stomped his feet, raised his hands, and flashed 8 razor-sharp blades, hurling them with a sudden jerk. 8 kunai flew out, colliding in mid-air before changing direction and darting towards Ebizo. Ebizo's puppet's eyes swung back and forth, recording every angle of the kunai's deflection, then continuously unleashed wind blades to send them flying. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. By the 4th kunai collision, Ebizo's eyes were barely keeping up. Yet, the next wave of kunai rain had arrived. 8, 16, 24. Countless kunai flew in, refracting through the air. Hidden among them were 2 flying thunder god kunai. For a moment, Ebizo's scalp tingled, and he continuously unleashed wind-cutting technique to cleave them apart. Seeing this, Uchiha Chi's lip curled up, and he turned to Minato, who stared at him in astonishment. Are you ready? Let's go. Before he could even consider why Uchiha Chi, half dead just a moment ago, was leaping with life the next moment, Minato immediately sensed his intention from his movements, and his eyes lit up. You mean? Both the men reacted with astonishing speed, their tacit understanding evident in this moment. Instantly, a flash of yellow light shot out, and he suddenly surpassed Uchiha Chi. At the same time, Uchiha Chi suddenly activated his heart, igniting his chakra and transforming into brief fire-style chakra mode. He drew his Kusanagi sword and unleashed a 6-foot flaming blade. He rushed forward, plunging into the sea of fire, his gaze fixed fiercely on Ebizo. He raised his blade and slashed down, forcing Ebizo to raise his left arm to block it. However, mid-range, the 6-foot flaming blade changed from a slash to a shot, and the blazing red blade instantly protruded. At the same time, Namake's Minato, already grasping the flying thunder god kunai, dodged behind Ebizo and swung his blade horizontally. Ebizo's eyes were filled with rage. In this moment of crisis, he abruptly ducked to avoid the incoming flaming blade, only piercing his ear. He then swung his arm, wielding his 4-bladed chakra blade, slicing Uchiha Chi in 2 at the waist. The puppet behind him suddenly unleashed a torrent of poisonous thousand bones, forcing Minato to abandon his attack and quickly evade. But then, Ebizo noticed a smile on the face of the Uchiha brat before him. The next moment, the second flying thunder god kunai, after a final deflection, fell. Minato Namake's instantly reappeared behind Ebizo. Under Ebizo's horrified gaze, he smoothly caught a flying thunder god kunai and spun around, slashing down. A single blade swung down. Blood sprayed. At the same time, Minato Namake's and Uchiha Chi's excited voices rang out simultaneously. This is the flashing super wheel dance roar farewell slash, second style. This is the flashing super wheel dance roar immortal 3-blade slash, second style. Chapter 164, Retire after success and seal the evil magic seal. Bang! A sturdy, aged figure collapsed into the sea of flames. The ninja's high attack and low defense were fully demonstrated at this moment. With half his neck severed by Minato, even a cage-level warrior finally reached the end of his life. Ebizo, however, stared at the pale red barrier before him, cracked and shattered at the slightest touch. Behind it stood the 4th Kazekage, Raza, impassive and motionless. To his death, he never understood why our Raza hadn't intervened. As the Kazekage, why had he stood by and watched his fellow villagers fall into such dire straits? Was he under the spell of an illusion, or was everything before him a mere mirage floating on the desert sand? Was it all just a fantasy? Haha, Ebizo gasped, his head tilted back, his eyes bloodshot as he stared intently at Raza. He covered the back of his neck which was spurting blood in vain, climbed up again, dragged his steps forward, his eyes were dazed for a moment. He seemed to see his young and beautiful sister Chiyo, who was like a desert rose, standing at the gate of the village, opening her arms to him, and saying to him, "Hoodoaruo, come to your sister." Puff. Ugh. Ebizo suddenly vomited another mouthful of blood, his vision blurred, and his steps forward became more and more staggering. Yes, sister, I finally understand. People like me don't need a final place to stay, just keep moving forward. Ebizo staggered forward, and he seemed to see everyone in the village standing in front, waiting for his triumphant return. Yes, I finally understand. My vision, the vision of the Tsunaga cure. Everything, as long as you don't stop, the path will continue. At the last moment, Ebizo finally struggled to the edge of the barrier and stared intently at Raza outside. His eyes held no resentment or anger, only hope. Raza, can you understand this? That's why, don't let the war stop. Don't stop moving forward. Ebizo raised his finger, smeared with blood, and finally traced it across the barrier before fading into silence. Thus, the legend of this top leader of the Tsunagakure, the supreme commander of the Tsunagakure faction in the Land of Rain, a cage-level warrior skilled in wind escape and puppetry, came to an end in this ninja world. His two halves flew into the sea of fire. Uchiha Chi, panting heavily, used the Great Snake style substitution jutsu for the third and final time he could use it, conjuring up a brand new self. He stood up again, his crimson serpent eyes fixed on the barrier, his gaze fixed on this side indifferently. Only after seeing Ebizo completely dead did he begin to approach Raza. As Raza took a step, a magnetic sand mat rose from beneath his feet, lifting him high into the air. Immediately, a tsunami of golden dust surged upwards, layer upon layer, rising higher and higher until it obscured the sky and the sun. It lashed towards the barrier. Observing this apocalyptic scene, Uchiha Chi's gaze narrowed slightly, and he asked the young man beside him, "Minato, are you still able to fight?" Nearby, Namikaze Minato watched Uchiha Chi's movements with a twitching eyelid. Although he knew Uchiha Chi was a disciple of Orochimaru, one of the Sannin, he had never imagined that in such a short time, this young Uchiha had already mastered Orochimaru's true teachings and mastered the ability to such an extent. "Ah, the opponent is the fourth Kazakage Raza." Minato nodded, took a deep breath, and there was no fear in his eyes. Uchiha Chi frowned and asked in a deep voice, "Why is he here? Did Orochimaru go to assassinate him?" Minato was silent for a moment, then said, "The plan has changed. We intercepted Yikang and Shio. Raza did not appear at the location described in the intelligence. Now it has evolved into a frontal battlefield. Lord Orochimaru and Sensei Jiraiya are fighting there." After hearing this, Uchiha Chi's expression suddenly brightened up. His eyes fell on Raza, who was slowly flying towards here. He couldn't help licking his dry lips. Even the highest commander of Sand Village, Ebizo, was killed. The plot has collapsed. Uchiha Chi now points out that the barefoot are not afraid of those wearing shoes, and simply breaks the jar. That is to say, now, the assassination target is in front of us, we may be able to do it here, kill him. Hearing this, Minato couldn't help but look at Uchiha Chi with a strange look in his eyes and shook his head. "No, you've done enough." He pulled a scroll from his bosom and tossed it toward Uchiha Chi. "This is from Lord Orochimaru." Taking it, Uchiha Chi discovered it was a summoning scroll. Unfolding it, he saw a large character for snake. "Orochimaru gave it to me." He frowned slightly, raised his hand, and formed the no seal. Bang! A cloud of summoning smoke rose from the scroll, and a small, huddled, white snake appeared on top. "Is it a messenger snake?" Uchiha Chi was no stranger to this little white snake, having seen it once the night he mastered summoning. This snake, developed based on the information transmitting capabilities of summoning and reverse summoning techniques, was a further advancement. Not only was its transmission more secretive and proactive, but if accidentally intercepted, the snake could spontaneously destroy the information. Furthermore, due to the scalability of the snake mouth binding technique, it could transmit more than just information. It could even take on some of the functions of transporting supplies. It was a top-tier intelligence transmission technique. However, it's extremely expensive and difficult to cultivate, and there aren't many snakes in the entire Raichi cave that meet the requirements for transformation. Uchiha Chi frowned slightly at the snake. "Does Orochimaru have information to tell me? Or does he want me to send something back?" Minato took 2 steps forward, picked up Ebizo's body, and threw it in front of Uchiha Chi. Though his expression showed some reluctance, he spoke solemnly. "Ninja corpses are natural repositories of intelligence, and Ebizo is the supreme commander of Tsunagakure. If we can dig out the information in his mind, we'll have won half the battle." So, at that moment, boom! Snap! A massive mass of gold dust crashed down, crashing down onto the pale red barrier, crushing the entire death battle barrier to a resounding roar. Spiderweb-like cracks crawled across the barrier surface, squeezing and exploding. At that moment, high in the sky, Raza, standing on a ball of sand, raised one hand and coldly stared at the 2 men in the barrier below. He shouted in a deep voice, "Leave Ebizo's body behind, and I'll let you go, otherwise, die." At this moment, Raza finally approached. He immediately demanded Ebizo's body. To him, a living Ebizo meant uncertainty and the potential for trouble. But a dead Ebizo was a real bargain. Not only could he bring him back to make Elder Chiyo cry, but he could also suppress his political enemies, negate Tsunagakure's strategy on the front lines, and give him a chance to break the deadlock and participate in it, all in one. Raza naturally couldn't miss such a good opportunity. However, Neither of the two men in the barrier took Raza's words seriously. Minato was a master of sealing techniques and the Flying Thunder God technique. Unless it was a deadly fight with no way out, Raza wouldn't even be able to touch his clothes. And Uchiha Chi simply showed no fear, even wanting to have a fight with Raza. Hearing Luosha showing off in the sky, Uchiha Chi immediately frowned, thinking to himself, my buddy hasn't come out to deal with you yet, and you're already whining. He immediately shouted impatiently at the flying birdman, shut up, I'll come out and kill you later, you. Luosha felt suffocated, and his eyes turned more and more unfriendly as he looked at Uchiha Chi. For a moment, the sky full of gold dust surged even more violently. The gold dust also began to condense into various shapes in Luosha's hands, brazenly chiseling towards the barrier. Meanwhile, within the barrier, the little white snake, following Uchiha Chi's gaze, vomited for a long time, but failed to produce a scroll containing the intelligence. This puzzled Uchiha Chi. He took 2 steps forward, squatted down, grabbed the little white snake, pried open its mouth, and poured it out. Damn it, you didn't swallow the intelligence scroll and digested it in your stomach, spit it out. Just as Uchiha Chi was wondering, the little white snake, which he had grasped like an upside-down snakeskin sack, suddenly leaped up, freed itself from his grasp, and slithered down his arm to his neck. With a fierce bite, it bit the Heaven's Curse seal. The next moment, Uchiha Chi's pale skin visibly faded into black lines, and then the lines shrank back into the Heaven's Curse seal. Then, a black ring of magic seals suddenly appeared around the Heaven's Curse seal, forcibly interrupting the seal's continuous absorption of natural energy and locking it in place. Sealing technique, sealing evil seal. The little white snake sucked again, ensuring it had completely drained all of Uchiha Chi's natural energy. Then, through its fangs, it exchanged poison, injecting a powerful paralyzing venom into Uchiha Chi's body. Bang! Uchiha Chi's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed, headfirst into a pile of sand. Then, the little white snake opened its maw and used the ninjutsu, snake mouth binding, swallowing him whole. With another swoop, it devoured Eberzo's body as well. Finally, under the silent gaze of Minato Namikaze, the little white snake transformed into a puff of smoke, responding to the summons from Orochimaru, 100 miles away, and vanished without a trace. Only then did Minato raise his head to gaze upon the dazzling golden dust pouring down from the sky after the barrier shattered. A gentle smile appeared on his face. Sorry, Uchiha Chi, you've done enough. Next, leave this to me. He fixed his eyes, raised his hand and opened it, revealing the Flying Thunder God kunai at his fingertips. The next moment, Namikaze Minato turned into a yellow flash that was difficult to distinguish with the naked eye, and rushed straight towards the gold sand funeral. Chapter 165 Obito, you actually became a genin. In the Land of Fire, at the Konoha camp, inside the camp's specially constructed medical ninja tent, Uchiha Chi opened his eyes. He was greeted by a dark green tarpaulin. His nose lingered with a faint scent of blood, filtered by sunlight and thick with it. Near his ears, a slightly noisy banging sound echoed, as if construction were underway outside the tent. The clatter of hammers, the thud of sawn wood, and several young voices that sounded very familiar to him. 3 against, King Bomb, Kakashi, how do you play cards like that? I'm 3 against, is that a problem? I only have 1 left, as expected of my eternal rival, Kakashi. Okay, I'm going to do 500 push-ups, or 20 laps around the camp. You idiot, why didn't you break his cards? At these words, Uchiha Chi suddenly raised his head, his brows furrowing. What the hell is this Naruto-themed theater? Just by the sound of their voices, I know it's Uchiha Obito, Kakashi, and my guy. The key question is, how did these 3 people appear on the Rain Country battlefield at the same time, playing cards? Hey, are you awake? A girl with short brown hair and 2 streaks of purple paint on her face approached, carrying a square tray. She wore a long-sleeved black shirt, a light pink skirt, and leggings. She had a red bracelet on her wrist, and her smile was warm and bright. The wooden tray contained modern-looking medical equipment, a square tray, a gauze jar, a stethoscope, a blood pressure monitor, scissors, and ointment. It looked like they were here to change the dressing. It was then that Uchiha Chi realized that every part of his body was aching, as if he'd run 10 marathons in a row, his organs groaning in agony. But it didn't matter. Seeing this person, Uchiha Chi raised an eyebrow slightly. Isn't this his brother Obito's secret crush, Naharin? Soon, Lin came over and placed the wooden tray on the cabinet next to Uchiha Chi. Then, she raised her head and shouted outside the tent, "Obito, the friend you are going to visit has woken up." As soon as these words came out, there was a commotion outside the tent. "Hey! Lin is calling me. I haven't played this card yet, it doesn't count." Soon, a young man with a Tom-like smile on his face, wearing sunglasses and a Konoha forward protector, a sports jacket, and a ninja tool bag tied to his dark blue trouser legs, poked his head into the tent. "Rin, thank you so much." Upon entering the tent, Uchiha Obito didn't even glance at Uchiha Chi, who lay in the hospital bed. He immediately grabbed Rin's hand and began to ask about his well-being. "Hey, if it weren't for you, Sue wouldn't have recovered so quickly. How's it been lately? Is the medical team's work hard?" Uchiha Chi was speechless. Even Rin felt a little overwhelmed by his enthusiasm, and could only offer a gentle smile. "Obito, go check on your friend. I have things to do." With that, Rin picked up the tray and trotted out the door, tilting her head as if searching for a certain white-haired figure. Obito was speechless, frozen in thought, a momentary suspense, a lingering presence. He stood there for a long time, unable to let go. Only after the figure disappeared from view did he scratch his head and suddenly remember who he was supposed to be visiting. As the two Uchiha's eyes met, the tent descended into long, ditzy awkwardness. Finally, it was Uchiha Chi who broke the silence. Looking at Obito expressionlessly, "Suchi-kun, you didn't come to visit me at all. Brother gives you a piece of advice. It's better to give up this relationship that is doomed to have no results." Obito coughed twice, pretending not to hear Uchiha Chi's barking, and walked over with a laugh. He raised his hand and slapped Uchiha Chi on the shoulder, grinned and raised his thumb, pointing to his forward protector, and said very arrogantly, "See, you don't have the qualifications to teach me a lesson now, so what if you have a few hundred D-level mission experiences? I, Uchiha Obito, just led the team to complete a B-level mission. You must have never experienced the tense atmosphere of escorting emergency supplies for the vanguard troops behind the smoke-filled battlefield, and always being on guard against a possible ambush by the Sand Village troops. Isn't it amazing? As long as I keep practicing like this, I will step by step become a Chunin, a Jonin, open the Sharingan, and possess 3 Magatama. And finally become the greatest 5th Hokage in Konoha's history." Uchiha Chi looked at Obito, his eyes filled with shock. "So you're just here to brag about this to your buddies?" However, this really stumped him for a moment. After all, Obito had never experienced the B-rank missions he was undertaking. What was he supposed to say? He'd just accomplished a feat of single-handedly taking on 300 sand villagers, and then had a hearty, manly battle with a cage-level warrior? And finally, he'd even fought alongside your teacher, Minato Namikaze, and together they'd slain the Sand Village's supreme commander? What kind of mission was that? S rank, or even SS rank? No, 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 no. If he told anyone about it, it would sound like a fairy tale. Obito would probably think he was just bragging. So, Uchiha Chi decided to try a different approach. He keenly grasped the loophole in Obito's words, raised an eyebrow, and mercilessly exposed him. "Hiss, Tuzi, I remember that B-rank missions require a Chunin to accept, right? It seems that Hatake Kakashi is the only Chunin on your team. Oh, doesn't that mean that it was actually Kakashi who led you to complete the mission? Could it be that you were just filling in the numbers?" And Obito's exaggerated smile froze. Sweat immediately covered his forehead. He nervously peeled an apple and quickly stuffed it into Uchiha Chi's mouth, anticipating that Uchiha Chi had more firepower coming out of him and decided to block it first. "Okay, stop talking, isn't it just a Chunin? Once I open these eyes, not only will I surpass that snotty white-haired fellow, I'll even beat him to becoming a Jonin." Obito huffed, his nostrils raised, proudly pointing a thumb at his large, Caroline-like eyes. However, just then, a series of hurried footsteps suddenly rang out from outside the tent. A large hand suddenly parted the curtain, and then, a young man wearing dark sunglasses and shrouded in a black robe, and a young man with a pineapple-like hairstyle, draped in a deerskin coat, walked in side by side. Obito looked up and was startled. He didn't recognize the man in the sunglasses, but the man with the pineapple-like hairstyle next to him, wasn't it Nara Shikoku, the camp's military advisor who assigned missions? Obito was just about to go up and say hello cheerfully, thinking that getting to know this pineapple-haired guy might lead to him receiving even more impressive missions in the future. However, after Nara Shikoku lifted the door curtain, He looked directly at Uchiha Chi and said in a very serious tone, "Uchiha Chi, come with us, your genin investiture ceremony will begin now." Chapter 166, We may disappear, but the sun will rise as usual. As soon as Narashikoku said this, Obito's eyes widened. Wait, Kid Almaty, is something wrong? See, he's a genin like me. Is there something wrong with his promotion system? How could he? Alice, you found out. Uchiha Chi weakly climbed off the bed, leaning against the wall. He glanced at Obito, his face suddenly curled into a grin. "Tsuchi-sama," he said. "I was trying to get along with you as a normal person, but all I got in return was your arrogance." "Alright," Uchiha Chi patted Obito's shoulder, grinning. "I'm done pretending, I'm a peerless tough guy. I'm laying it on the table." With that, Uchiha Chi brushed past Obito and followed Narashikoku and Aburame Ryoma out of the tent. Obito was left alone, standing in the center of the tent with a look of shock. He opened the tent's curtains. The sunlight shone brightly outside, so bright that Uchiha Chi squinted slightly. When he opened his eyes again, he saw the group outside, their gazes fixed on him. Kakashi Hatake, Rin Nahara, Genma Shiranu, Might Guy and Ebisu are all familiar faces, but Uchiha Chi is a pure family ninja and has never attended ninja school. He knows this group of people, but this group of people does not know him. Their eyes met for only a moment and soon moved away. Uchiha Chi continued to follow Ryoma Aburame and continued to move forward towards the central army camp. Looking at Uchiha Chi's departing figure, Shiranu Genma, holding the toothpick in his mouth, widened his eyes slightly and said in surprise, "Did you see it? That guy seems to be Lord Orochimaru's new disciple, and his name seems to be Uchiha Chi." Ebisu stood aside with envy in his eyes. He knew very well the huge gap between a young genius ninja from a big family with a powerful teacher and a common ninja like him, but he still couldn't help but look up at him, like an ordinary moth chasing a light source. At this moment, he shook his head and said enviously, "You don't know, but besides this, he may be the fastest ninja to be promoted to genin in Konoha, or even the entire ninja world." News just came in this morning. Because of his outstanding performance in the last battle, this Uchiha Chi was promoted to genin as an exception, a 12-year-old genin. This is even more powerful than Kakashi. Nahara Lin looked at Uchiha Chi's back in surprise, and couldn't help but glance sideways at Kakashi beside him and asked, because of his outstanding performance in the last battle, he was promoted to genin as an exception, could he be the Shura who fought alongside Minato-sensei? Hearing these words, Kakashi couldn't help but frown, looking at Uchiha Chi's back and the Uchiha red and white round fan emblem printed on the back of his black robe. Then, he shook his head and analyzed calmly, "Impossible, Shura is Konoha's secret weapon. He was able to single-handedly defend against 300 Sand Village troops, and then fought with the top Sand Village powerhouses for a long time, and finally killed the Sand Village's highest commander. His strength may be no less than Minato-sensei's. He definitely can't be so young." This Uchiha Chi should have participated in Shura's raid like Uchiha Shisui, who was also promoted to Chunin because of this operation, and provided assistance to Shura at the critical moment. However, even so, his strength should not be underestimated. Kakashi narrowed his eyes slightly, a flicker of emotion stirring within him, a faint urge to try. As the most dazzling genius of his generation, this was the first time he'd encountered someone even more dazzling. His heart, long dormant since his father's death, now began to stir. Meanwhile, Sarutobi Asuma, standing beside Kurenai with his hands in his pockets, saw things differently. He scoffed. "Uchiha Chi? I know, he's just a lucky Uchiha who was accepted as a disciple by Orochimaru because the village needed him, and now he's even lucky enough to complete a mission with Shura-sama, haha. He's just a connection." Everyone saw Uchiha Chi as mysterious, powerful, or perhaps just a connection. He could faintly hear some of this discussion, even though he hadn't walked far. And as he followed Aburame Ryoma and Narashikoku through the camp, he heard even more versions of the story from the other ninjas. There were so many different versions, so many different stories. This surprised Uchiha Chi somewhat. Konoha seemed to be hiding his achievements, attributing these feats and legends to his identity as a root ninja called Shuro. He himself seemed to be just an ordinary 12-year-old genin. At this moment, Aburame Ryoma, who was walking with him, pushed up his sunglasses, smiled slightly, and asked, "It seems you heard it too. Well, do you feel a little wronged?" Uchiha Chi shook his head. This distinction between their identities actually made his daily life more convenient. Killing Ebisu seemed even more significant than he had imagined. The streets were filled with ninja discussing this matter, and when news of this spread back to Konoha, who knew what kind of uproar it would stir? If you were surrounded and asked for autographs just by leaving the house, Uchiha Chi would probably be quite troubled. Although separating his identities in this way made him feel less direct and happy, the feeling of walking in the night in fine clothes, standing in front of others, and listening to others praising their own masks was simply super cool. Uchiha Chi arched his eyebrows and asked with a smile, "That's good. Who are the people who know about my identity?" Aburain Ryoma explained as he walked. "Only the root and the top leaders know about it. In addition, the teammates who followed you have been ordered to keep their mouths shut." He was silent for a while before speaking. "The outside world will only know that it was Shura who killed Ebizo, not you, Uchiha Chi, who killed Ebizo. You should understand that we roots are different. You and I are both ninjas who live under masks." Aburain Ryoma said this, shook his head, looked at the scorching sun in the sky, and glanced at Uchiha Chi who was beside him listening to the praise from outsiders with his mouth almost grinning to the sky. He suddenly sneered and said with a proud tone, "But, maybe we will disappear, but the sun will rise as usual." Uchiha Chi turned his head, a little confused, and asked in surprise, "What did you say?" Aburain Ryoma pulled back the brim of his hood and coughed. "Nothing to say, just go ahead." The three of them finally reached the main camp. Aburain Ryoma paused, not entering. Nara Shikoku led him into the main camp's tent. After a series of procedures like filling out forms, taking photos, and recording missions, "Here, kid, here's your new ID." Nara Shikoku handed him a ninja ID card. Uchiha Chi looked it over. It looked identical to his previous one, except for an additional line of text in the mission history section. Uchiha Chi. Rank, Jonin. Ninja number. 009888. Mission history. 1S plus level, 1S level, 855D level missions. Then, Nara Shikoku didn't celebrate with flowers or fireworks. Instead, he pulled Uchiha Chi over, leaned over, and whispered in his ear, "This shouldn't be said by me, but Master Jiraiya has already left the camp, and he asked me to tell you, becoming a Jonin at such a young age is not a good thing. You have to be careful of some hidden tricks, for example, the route you serve." Uchiha Chi looked up in astonishment, looking at the other person, a little surprised. But Nara Shikoku acted as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't said anything just now. He stood up, took out a document from the table with his backhand, and handed it to Uchiha Chi. "Finally, Uchiha Chi, after discussion among the top leaders, your application to return to the village to recuperate has been approved. You can go home." Chapter 167. Orochimaru is shocked and angry, and the wood release experiment is restarted. "Go home." Uchiha Chi's body trembled at Nara Shikoku's words, and he jerked his head up. "Huh? When did I ever ask for that? No, wait a minute. I'm not injured. I can still fight. Ta-ta, I'm on my own." Well, these kids are such a hassle these days." Nara Shikoku scratched his ear impatiently, banging his head on the table. "Ask your boss. You keep throwing all the trouble at me, or, can you just help me with this pile of paperwork?" Nara Shikoku slumped behind his desk, piled high with paperwork. He looked at Uchiha Chi with a disinterested expression, pushing a man-sized pile of documents toward him. The pile shook with a clatter. Looking at it, Uchiha Chi swallowed hard, suppressing the complaint rising in his throat. On closer inspection, given Uchiha Chi's current status and combat prowess, his deployments were no longer within the purview of Nara Shikoku, Jiraiya's deputy military advisor. There was no point in arguing with him now. "Well, it seems you understand that, although this is only our second meeting, we're acquaintances at least." Then formally introduce myself. "I'm Nara Shikoku, the deer of the Ino, deer, and Jo families, and the future head of the Nara clan." Nara Shikoku straightened up and smiled. A flicker of admiration flickered in his gaze as he looked at Uchiha Chi. He rummaged under his desk, pulled out 3 gift boxes, placed them on the table, and pushed them over. "I personally don't like ceremonies, they're too much trouble. After much deliberation, I've decided to give you this." "Well, Uchiha Chi, congratulations on becoming a Jonin." Carrying 3 gift boxes of varying sizes, Uchiha Chi emerged from the tent, still bewildered. He still couldn't understand why he was being transferred back to the village. A glance around reveals that the main Konoha camp is undergoing major renovations. Most of the Konoha ninja are carrying wood and hammers, moving back and forth, transporting supplies for building structures. It seems the Konoha side, aware of the protracted battle, is currently erecting wooden huts outside their tents. The clamor Uchiha heard earlier is the sound of construction. Since the situation on the front lines remains so intense, Orochimaru should continue to fight, confronting various powerful foes. By staying here, he can still disrupt the alliance between Iwagakure and Tsunagakure, and battle Raza, Chiyo, Iwagakure's tailed beasts, the four-tailed beast, the five-tailed beast, Anoki, and countless other masters. So, why shouldn't it be? What exactly happened? At this time, Aburame Ryoma, who was waiting outside the tent, took the gift box smoothly from Uchiha Chi's hand and took a look at it. Tisk tisk, you are quite popular. You even received a gift from Ano Shikacho, let me see. The Yamanaka family sent flowers, anthurium, and the flower card said I wish you a prosperous future. The Akimichi family sent a pickled pork leg, Narashikaku. As expected, this lazy guy just gave money, 500,000 taels. Uchiha Chi turned his head and looked at his boss who was commenting on the gift he received. He frowned and asked, Senior Ryoma, why? Aburame Ryoma knew what Uchiha Chi wanted to ask. He handed the gift box back. Immediately, a root ninja who had been following behind him appeared, took the gift box with both hands and disappeared on the spot. Then, he sighed, looked at Uchiha Chi, whose cheeks were so thin that there was not much flesh on them, and asked back. Do you know how long you were unconscious? Uchiha Chi was stunned. He scratched his slightly itchy neck and asked in surprise, half a day, or a day. He didn't feel how much time had passed. His memory still stayed at the moment when he was bitten by the summoned little white snake and the natural energy in his body was drained away. Aburame Ryoma exhaled heavily and sighed quietly. You were unconscious for a full half a month, do you understand what I mean? The war is over. In this battle, the Konoha surprise attack force led by Shura destroyed the Sand Village camp and dug a huge gap in the Sand Village's line, which provided great convenience for the counterattack. Afterwards, Shura killed the Sand Village's highest commander Ebizo. His feat shocked all the Konoha ninjas. After Shura and Yellow Flash killed Ebizo, the Konoha side obtained a lot of information about Sand Village from the dead Ebizo's brain. With the intelligence obtained, Orochimaru led the Konoha troops to launch a counterattack, and gradually conquer the Sand Village's positions in the Land of Rain. The Sand Village, which lost its command and fell into civil strife, had to retreat to the oasis behind the border of the Land of Wind Station. Konoha won a great victory. One battle shocked all countries. After that, Tsunagakure secretly contacted Iwagakure and sent envoys to contact Anoki. Lord Jiraiya led a surprise attack team in an attempt to destroy the Sandstone Alliance, but encountered the Four Tails and the Five Tails and was forced to retreat. The Sandstone Alliance is a foregone conclusion, but fortunately, we have gained the upper hands in the Rain Country, and Iwagakure is engaged in a long-term battle with Kurigakure. Currently, the situation has stabilized. There will be no large-scale combat for at least 6 months. Uchiha Chi stood there in shock, looking up at Ryoma Aburame in front of him. Half a month has already passed. I've been sleeping for the whole half month. And so many major events have happened during this time. Konoha's counterattack, the Sandstone Alliance, Jiraiya's failed surprise attack, and the encounter with the tailed beasts. Uchiha Chi's eyes suddenly focused, and he looked at Ryoma Aburame and asked, what about Orochimaru? Why didn't Orochimaru-sensei wake me up? Where's he now? What the hell is this Birdman Orochimaru doing? Such an exciting party, and you didn't bring him? Hearing this, Aburame Ryoma was furious. He gritted his teeth and looked at Uchiha Chi heavily. Do you know that you almost had your soul completely twisted into a snake? Who the hell taught you to use the Heaven's Curse seal recklessly and rashly touch the power of the sage? Listen, this is what Orochimaru asked me to tell you. The power of the Ryochi cave is very dangerous. You are on the verge of losing yourself without knowing it. In addition, your body has overdrawn its vitality. You are not dead now, only because the immortal body has given you the concept of immortality. But this is not true immortality. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. Anyway, Aburame Ryoma suddenly sighed, stepped forward and hugged Uchiha Chi. Welcome back, my disciple. He paused, and added, welcome back, my subordinates. After letting go of Uchiha Chi, Aburame Ryoma raised his head, looked in the direction of Konoha, and said in a deep voice, in order to save you. Orochimaru resigned from his position as commander and returned to Konoha after completing the counterattack. Now, you must return to Konoha immediately. There are 3 reasons. The first is our immediate superior, the one who controls the darkness of the ninja world. He wants to see you. The second is that the Uchiha clan strongly demands that you return to the village immediately. Then the last and most important reason is if you want to survive, you need a new power. For this reason, Orochimaru restarted the wood release experiment. Chapter 168 Bagua Seal, Farewell Gift. As Abure and Ryoma spoke these words to see, the two of them were clearly within the camp, yet there was no sound around them. It was as if the surrounding sounds had been drained away. The sounds of construction, ninja chatter, loading and unloading, and so on, filled Uchiha Chi's ears long after Abure and Ryoma's words had fallen. The cacophony of sounds brought Uchiha Chi back to his thoughts, causing him to frown. Orochimaru had restarted the wood release experiment? To save him? Yet, he clearly felt that his condition was not that bad. He clenched his fists. Though a little weak, Uchiha Chi could sense the abundant strength within them. If he so desired, this power could be converted into a vast amount of chakra, unleashing a terrifying burst of power. But he soon discovered another blind spot. Such a large amount of chakra was not spontaneously channeled into the forbidden technique of corporeal transformation to repair his weakened body. Black lines seemed to fill the crevices of his flesh, disrupting the flow of chakra. These lines intertwined, forming a large-scale sealing technique, ultimately forming two dense spiral patterns on his abdomen and heart, somewhat similar to Naruto's 8-trigram seal. This seal blocked his spontaneous use of the forbidden technique, flesh transformation, as well as his ability to sense the zero tails within him, but it didn't completely block it. Uchiha Chi sensed that if he desired to forcibly access this sealed power, he could do so. This is the 8-trigram seal that Orochimaru asked Minato to carve on you. Don't worry too much, it's not a bad thing. In fact, it will help you better control the power of the tailless tailed beast within you. Abure and Ryoma patted Uchiha Chi's shoulder, motioning him to follow, and led him forward. I know your mind is a mess right now, but it's okay. You'll have plenty of time to think things through. Before that, go say goodbye to your friends. Soon, the two returned to the medical nin camp they had come from. Abure and Ryoma, walking in front, lifted the curtain of a tent, revealing the scene inside. Inside were rows of white-covered beds, all silent and still. A short figure in an Uchiha uniform stood silently before a bed, clutching a wakizashi. Shisui, gazing at the figure and the row of white-covered beds, Uchiha Chi's heart trembled slightly. And what are these? The atmosphere was truly solemn, causing Uchiha Chi to slow his pace and step forward lightly. Uchiha Shisui sensed his approach and looked up, his eyes filled with sadness. In his crimson Sharingan eyes, a pair of 3 Magatama slowly moved around his dark pupils. See, you're here. Shisui's head was bandaged, one arm in a cast hung around his neck, the white bandages stained with blood. However, compared to the long row of beds covered in white sheets before him, exuding a heavy, deathly silence. Why are you here? And what are these? Uchiha Chi couldn't help but swallow, staring at the bed in front of Shisui in astonishment. Normally, even the head of a bed like this would be covered with a white sheet. Shisui was silent for a moment, then lowered his head. His voice was low, heavy with weariness. As you can see, everyone from Konoha's surprise attack force is here. What did you say? Uchiha Chi suddenly raised his head, about to ask something, but lost his voice. Then, he saw Shisui close his eyes in grief. With his one remaining hand, he slowly grasped the white sheet covering the body on the bed in front of him and slowly peeled it back. A familiar face suddenly appeared before Uchiha Chi. It was Uchiha Shinichi. Uchiha Chi immediately recalled the moment he bravely stepped forward to stop Eberzo's personal guards, and his heart trembled. His scarlet Sharingan suddenly lit up. But then, the next moment, Uchiha Shinichi suddenly opened his Sharingan. A mischievous smile crossed his face as he observed the mixture of astonishment, sadness, and surprise on Uchiha Chi's face. His expression turned cold. He grabbed Uchiha Chi by the collar, turned him over, and pinned him to the bed. Boy, you're so proud of yourself. Instantly, sheets of pristine white cloth were thrown into the air. Familiar ninjas straightened up, and the entire Konoha surprise force glared at Uchiha Chi. Have you ever thought about how we feel? Uchiha Chi then realized that this group had colluded with a naive Shisui to commit a scam. He stared at the hostile glances, especially at Shisui, who was standing by the bed. His gaze was dark and deep, like a black hole hidden in his pupils. Uchiha Chi couldn't help but swallow and squirmed in fear. Wait, what are you going to do, Shinichi? You're so despicable. You're actually using Shisui to trick me. Uchiha Shinichi grinned, his eyes raised slightly. What are we going to do? Haha, of course, to congratulate our commander on his promotion to genin. He then turned to look at Uchiha Shisui, who had proposed the plan, and asked excitedly, Shisui, what should we do? You decide. Uchiha Shisui raised his little face and stared at Uchiha Chi, a devilish grin on his lips. First, strip him naked. The next day, in front of the gate of Konoha camp, a team returning to the village was gathering in front of the camp. A masked little white-haired man was boredly feeding grass to the horses pulling the cart. At this moment, Hokage Kakashi frowned, looked up at the camp, and asked impatiently to the yellow-haired young man sitting in the cart, who was lost in thought as if thinking about something, Teacher Minato, Obito is late again. In this camp, he can't have an old lady to help cross the road, right? This idiot. On the side, Nahorin heard this and smiled gently and helplessly. I seem to have seen Obito delivering letters to the wounded. Well, he should be here soon. Wait a little longer. At this moment, Obito ran out of the camp quickly with a large bag full of letters on his back, and waved to the 3 members of the team from a distance. I'm late. Sorry. Minato came back to his senses at this time, looked at the bag on Obito's back, and smiled slightly. Kakashi, I asked Obito to do it. It seems we're the last group of people in the camp to get permission to return to the village. The rest of us will have to stay here for at least 6 months. These are the letters everyone sent back to their families, so I thought I'd take some back with them. Excuse me, Minato said, scratching the back of his head and giving a helpless smile. Minato-sensei, no need to apologize. Kakashi shook his head, watching Obito board the carriage, then looking at Minato, who showed no sign of leaving, and asked in surprise. Since Obito's here, why aren't we leaving yet? Minato replied, tilting his head slightly towards the camp. We're waiting for one more person, and here he is. The 3 children turned their heads simultaneously upon hearing this, and saw a young man, half a head taller than them, wearing a loose, short-collared black kimono with the Uchiha clan crest, long pants, and a purple rope tied around his waist. He walked over with an expressionless face and jumped onto the carriage with an expressionless face. He stared back at them expressionlessly, revealing the little turtle that had been painted all over his face, neck, and even below his collarbone by the entire Konoha surprise attack force thanks to Shisui yesterday. Facing the laughter-filled gazes of the 3 little ones and the big one, Uchiha Chi angrily asked, what are you looking at me for? This thing won't be washed off in a short time. I'm trying very hard to wash it off. Let's go. Chapter 169, Akatsuki's plan to save the nation, the prototype of Rasengan. The carriage, laden with uncontrollable laughter, slowly rolled toward home. It passed through hills, plains, canyons, and streams. Atop a cliff, Yohiko, gazing in the direction of the boy's return, withdrew his gaze and offered a brilliant smile to his companions behind him. Sure enough, this guy came for this. He did it. He brought this brief peace to the Rain country, which has been crying for a long time. On the side, Nagato frowned and analyzed calmly, but, Yohiko, the alliance between Tsunagakure and Iwagakure was still successful. When Iwagakure ends the war with Kurigakure, this place will become a real slaughterhouse. It will become the most chaotic and cruel area in the entire ninja world. This peace is short-lived and false, like the calm before the storm. Yohiko nodded, and a solemn look flashed in his eyes. That's right, but it is undeniable that the impact of Uchiha Chi's killing of Ebizo did rewrite the course of the war and indirectly save the Rain country. Tsunagakure withdrew from the border of the Rain country, and the scale of the fighting between the 2 sides gradually decreased. He bought us more time, so next, it's time for us to act. Konan, wearing a black raincoat, a light blue bun, and a white paper flower, was silent for a moment before suddenly asking, so, Yohiko, what should we do? She pursed her lips. Despite her deep trust in Yohiko, the realization of her ideals, coupled with the recent difficulties facing Akatsuki, still left her feeling lost. Simply expanding the organization and recruiting members was a major headache for the current Akatsuki. Our plan is to use words to make people understand each other, to stop wars, and to make enemies understand each other. That's too difficult. Ninjas traumatized by war are only filled with anger and hatred. Yohiko shook his head and smiled calmly. Konan, you're right, he chuckled softly, and when he raised his head again, his eyes were full of determination. But you have to understand that our goal is not to save the world, nor is it to make people all over the world understand each other. We act for peace in the Rain country, when women are still crying, when children are still starving, when men are still fleeing, when there is still a poor girl lost in the streets, when there is still a dark soul that has swallowed hatred and is ready to fight, wandering in this weeping country, we must keep fighting. Keep acting. We are not going to use words to persuade those who are full of hatred to give up revenge. That's unrealistic. What we really have to do is, we are taking these wandering stray dogs, these nameless rebel ninjas, these ambitious men obsessed with revenge, and leading them, now that they have understood pain, to realize this. We don't want others to suffer the same pain we've suffered. We act for this. Yohiko smiled broadly, looking at his companions, also clad in black robes, behind him. By now, dozens of people were standing beside him. He turned and continued to watch the carriage and the young man disappear into the distance. Once the young man disappeared, he glanced at Nagato, standing to his right. His eyes were filled with anticipation. Putting oneself in others' shoes, this was Yohiko's realm. He grounded himself in himself, his companions, and his country, accurately understanding himself and the situation, and taking practical, realistic actions, each step with unwavering confidence. His goal was to one day truly build a bridge of peace. His mission was to become the pillar that supported that bridge. And now, in his eyes, there were two people who could make that happen. Nagato, the heir of the Sage's Eye, and Uchiha Chi, the ever-present warrior who fought and achieved the heroic feat of ending war through his actions. His battles in the land of hot water brought peace to that land. Now, his battles in the land of rain have brought peace to that land again. Where will he fight next? Yohiko didn't know, but he offered the young man, embarking on his journey, a heartfelt blessing from Akatsuki. Have a safe journey. The carriage slowly made its way along the path, finally stopping at an abandoned village for rest. Since the fighting had slowed down and there were no urgent missions, Minato's team, along with Uchiha Chi, didn't rush back to the village, but moved at a leisurely pace. At that moment, Uchiha Chi and Namake's Minato leaned against a haystack, gazing at the sky. The three children chopped wood and boiled water, preparing for a picnic. Uchiha Chi wanted to help, but was quickly interrupted by Naholin's ridiculously rude words. You're still a patient, Mr. C. This earned him a glare of envy and resentment from his brother, Tsuchiko. Unburdened from work, Uchiha Chi could only lie down with Minato. Ever since leaving the camp, Namake's Minato had looked troubled. Uchiha Chi could probably guess what he was thinking. According to the storyline of the legend of Minato, Jiraiya led his team into the Land of Earth to try to disrupt the Sandstone Alliance. They were eventually met at the Land of Earth's gates by the Jinchuriki, the Four Tails Old Murasaki, and the Five Tails Han, who came to stop them. Minato was among the small group Jiraiya had assembled. After witnessing the tailed beast fall and the untouchable terror of the Jinchuriki, he couldn't help but think of his fellow Jinchuriki, Kushina. The thought of that terrifying monster within Kushina had kept Minato in his current trance. He lay on his back on the haystack, raised his palm, and grasped it toward the sun. A sudden wave of panic gripped him, as if the brilliant light in the sky were the tailed beast ball hurtling toward him. So, what should he do? How could a human resist such a force? Minato's palm trembled involuntarily, rotating slightly around the sun. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. A surge of chakra swirled within his palm. Uchiha Chi knew Minato was conceiving a new jutsu, hoping he'd soon witness the birth of the momentous Rasengan. However, he had no desire to get involved. In fact, his mind was in a state of confusion. Along the way, he'd encountered so many things, one after another, leaving him no time to breathe. Initially, driven by a desperate attempt to defraud insurance, he'd later, influenced by Orochimaru and his companions, taken suicidal actions. Now, the plot had taken a complete turn. Ebizo was dead, Tsunagakure had lost, and Iwagakure had been dragged into a protracted war by Kirigakure. It felt as if the entire world had suddenly become utterly unfamiliar to him. In such a strange world, defrauding insurance was a sure thing, and he had no way of knowing for sure whether the future would be good or bad. The only path left for him seemed to be the one Orochimaru had suggested, to pursue suicidal tendencies, to battle endlessly, and to forcibly enhance his combat power through an arsenal of forbidden techniques and secret arts. This seemed a relatively reliable path. But could he really pull it off? Without Indra Ashura's chakra, he couldn't claim the protagonist's role. The seemingly unstoppable Rinnegan, the Six Paths level ninja, lay beneath his senile eyes. Even deeper within, the wily Black Zetsu lurked. Unable to obtain the Rinnegan or the Outer Path Demon statue, could he achieve Six Paths status by relying on the ninja skill of Daidai? Could that possibly work? Uchiha Chi felt a wave of exhaustion. The more he thought about it, the more exhausted and lost he became. Gazing at the endless azure sky, he thought, fuck it. Just take it one step at a time. He cleared his mind of all thoughts, wanting only to savor this moment of peace. However, at that moment, Uchiha Chi's eyelids twitched, and he felt a sudden, heart-pounding surge around him. He whipped his head around, and saw a blue, violent, and extremely unstable ball of light rapidly expanding before his eyes. The next moment, Uchiha Chi's eyes suddenly widened. Holy shit. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170, Dark Rasengan. The concept of artificial tailed beast form. Whoosh! A violent blue ball rapidly expanded before his eyes, spinning madly counterclockwise. Uchiha Chi's scalp tingled, and he instinctively leaped away, drawing his Kusanagi sword with his backhand, ready to cleave the object before him. But the next moment, he abruptly stopped his sword. Minato still held the ball. He had to be careful not to let the future fourth Hokage die with this strike. Namikaze Minato realized that if the ball exploded, he would be in big trouble. He hurriedly tried to gather his chakra, but the massive amount of chakra already invested in the ball was spinning wildly under the centrifugal force, making it impossible to recapture it. As the ball grew larger and more violent, he reached for his ninja tool bag, leaving a kunai behind and instantly departing. In an instant, he transformed into a flash of yellow light, darting an unknown distance. Boom! After a loud explosion, the disheveled Minato used the flying thunder god to instantly return to the haystacks of the abandoned village. He scratched his frizzy blonde hair, a look of embarrassment on his face. Minato was about to apologize, but Uchiha Chi suddenly frowned, staring thoughtfully at the distant, post-explosion ground. At that moment, the still emerging Rasengan exploded, creating a massive, spiraling crater. This power, and its unstable, uncontrollable form, instantly reminded him of the dark chakra of the Zero Tails. It was equally violent, equally uncontrollable, and unusable for ninjutsu. Previously, this vast chakra had mostly been used for special effects, like the gust of wind created by the explosion state. The rest of the time, it was mostly channeled into the forbidden technique of flesh transformation. With a Heaven's Curse seal strengthening his body and the ability to use multiple levels of the Great Snake-style substitution jutsu, Uchiha Chi now had a wider range of tactical options. He no longer had to resort to the old practice of simply taking all the damage. Moreover, the repair efficiency of the Orochi-style substitution technique was even higher than that of the forbidden technique, flesh transformation. This forbidden technique suddenly found itself in a rather awkward yet indispensable position within his overall combat system. While it was certainly useful, as it was a prerequisite for other skills, its actual combat use was expected to decrease significantly. This left the Zero Tails Dark Chakra unused. This was undoubtedly a waste. Uchiha Chi had never found a good way to control this power, but now, after witnessing the operation of the prototype of Minato's Rasengan, his vision suddenly brightened. This rapid rotation generated centrifugal force, causing chakra to swirl uncontrollably and violently. What if, instead, they used violent chakra from the outset? For example, dark chakra? At this moment, Minato saw Uchiha Chi's dazed expression and assumed he was stunned by his impressive performance. He was only 12 years old, after all. Seeing this, he immediately felt deeply apologetic. Sorry, I was. Hold your tongue? Uchiha Chi immediately turned around and glared at Minato. How did you do that just now? After asking such a foolish question, Uchiha Chi realized that Minato was undoubtedly creating the Rasengan, and he was currently trapped in the final stage of its control. After witnessing the extreme compression, impossible for humans, the tailed beast ball. Created by combining yin and yang chakra in a ratio of 2:8, creating a force as powerful as a nuclear bomb, Minato was inspired to replace this compression process with rotation. This was different from the 3 stages of Rasengan training taught to Naruto by Jiraiya. The first stage was to rotate the chakra, the second stage was to make the rotating chakra extremely powerful, and the third stage was to maximize and maintain the rotation and power. From the outset, Minato had been working towards the third stage, aiming to create a tailed beast ball wieldable by human ninjas. Uchiha Chi frowned deeply, pondering deeply. With a future Naruto prince's demonstration, the Rasengan itself possessed considerable potential for development, allowing for the addition of any attribute. After all, the prince had once mastered 37 different Rasengan forms. Now, all Uchiha Chi needed to do was master the Rasengan and integrate the Zero Tails Dark Chakra into it. He could then develop a Dark Rasengan that would suit Uchiha Chi's combat system, one that could harness Dark Chakra. It was entirely feasible. However, a single Dark Rasengan seemed insufficient for Uchiha Chi's current abilities. Those he faced were generally cage-level masters, and one more Rasengan wouldn't change anything. This was precisely why Uchiha Chi hadn't considered it before. But now, after witnessing Minato's prototype Rasengan, he saw this method, built on the final stage, of controlling violent force through rotation. A rebellious, even more daring idea suddenly occurred to Uchiha Chi. His physical condition was far superior to that of a normal ninja like Minato. First, he was a half-tailed beast Jinchuriki, possessing even more terrifying regenerative abilities than a tailed beast Jinchuriki. Second, the deformation and control of the flames during his fire-style chakra mode explosion made him a half-tailed beast cloak. Finally, the speed and physical condition granted by the Heaven's Curse seal rivaled those of a tailed beast Jinchuriki's half-tailed beast form. The fire-style chakra mode wasn't as effective as one might imagine, and many powerful warriors who had faced Uchiha Chi had managed to resist it. However, if he shifted his focus, eschewing the concentrated attack power of the fire-style chakra mode and instead using it as a permanent transformation combined with the Heaven's Curse seal, Uchiha Chi would be a perfectly qualified artificial tailed beast. Furthermore, his cloak also possessed the same high-temperature burning properties as the Four Tails Jinchuriki, Lao Shi's molten-style chakra mode. From this perspective, it seemed that if only he could master the Dark Rasengan and figure out how to throw it, Uchiha Chi could completely impersonate a tailed beast. Minato needed to control the Rasengan's form and prevent it from exploding, so he could avoid harm and maintain stability in combat. But Uchiha Chi didn't need that. He needed greater firepower, a stronger explosion, and a wider range. Forming the Rasengan into true tailed beast ball would suit him better. And now, Minato's Rasengan, not a complete Rasengan, but a prototype, used a rapid rotation, creating centrifugal force that caused chakra to spiral uncontrollably and violently, thereby amplifying its power. This incorrect method, in turn, gave Uchiha Chi a great inspiration. He felt as if he had found the correct way to unleash the Rasengan, the Senjutsu Super Large Ball Dark Tailed Beast Ball Rasengan, out of control version, an artificial tailed beast ball. In this way, this jutsu will connect everything he's learned so far, forming an ultimate combat form that completely unleashes all of Uchiha Chi's combat power. A truly artificial, tailed beast mode. Boom. Instantly, Uchiha Chi felt as if a Rasengan had hit him in the head, and he became extremely excited. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Namake's Minato, who had an awkward expression on his face, not sure whether he should speak or not. A mischievous smile appeared on his face. Minato, can you perform it again? The one from before. Namake's Minato's eyes widened, and he looked at Uchiha Chi in astonishment, trying to explain. See, that jutsu isn't perfect yet. It still has many flaws. If you want to learn it, you might as well wait for me. Uchiha Chi immediately shook his head like a rattle. Rasengan? Who wants to learn that? No, I want to see the one you used just now. Uchiha Chi stared at Minato with shining eyes and suddenly gave a thumbs up. That one, super cool. Chapter 171 The Birth of Rasengan. The divine power appears at the door. Come again. A spring breeze whipped up white clouds, drifting them toward the horizon. Warm sunlight shone brightly, illuminating the abandoned village, gracing the towering haystacks. Super cool, these compliments echoed in Minato's ears. This was the first time someone had praised his jutsu to his face. And this person, who had fought alongside him in tacit understanding and shared his exceptional talent for naming, blushed slightly, a touch of embarrassment. After all, the expanding Rasengan had nearly struck his former comrade in the face, and Minato felt a pang of guilt, unsure how to refuse. Meanwhile, Uchiha Chi, noticing Minato's lack of response, realized he had been a bit rude. In the ninja world, a ninja's jutsu is their most precious treasure, let alone this special jutsu, enhanced by the tailed beast ball incapable of extreme form shifting. Without skills or attributes, it seemed every ninja could learn this technique. Its universality also meant its value was inestimable. His request to Minato, coupled with his Uchiha status, made it hard not to suspect he was trying to copy Minato's technique. Uchiha Chi scratched his head and added sincerely, "Think of it as me learning from you. I won't let you pay for the tuition. When I return to the village to collect the bounty for this mission, I'll borrow some from within the clan. In exchange, I have a few jutsu I can use." Even with C's words, Minato paused, then shook his head firmly. "See, this jutsu is truly dangerous. While you're fast, you might not be able to match its expansion and explosion speed. It could harm you. Sorry, I'll teach you once I've perfected it. There's no need for tuition. After all, we're partners who fought side by side." Minato spoke these words with both righteousness and kindness. Seeing this, Uchiha Chi felt a little helpless. Then, he sighed and had to raise his hand. In front of Minato, he lit up his Sharingan. Between his palms, a rapidly rotating chakra ball gradually rose. "Let me think about it. The first step is rotation. Rotate in the direction of the hair vortex. Concentrate the chakra to the center. Keep your eyes fixed on this point as a mark. Then its power. Increase the chakra and let it rotate irregularly, faster and faster. Finally, the third stage is to fix it. This is a bit difficult, as the chakra was injected into it, and he had experienced 100% control of the body in the curse seal state. With Uchiha Chi's current ability to control the body and chakra, although it was a bit difficult, he followed the steps that Jiraiya taught Naruto step by step. Soon, the Rasengan between his palms gradually began to take shape. The first two steps went smoothly, until the last one. Due to the rush, the chakra began to fluctuate erratically. Uchiha Chi quickly covered it with his other hand, like Naruto, one hand holding the Rasengan while the other constantly controlled the chakra above it, pushing back the protruding outer wall. Finally, with great difficulty, a bright blue chakra ball formed between his palms. Rasengan. A subtitle immediately appeared before his eyes: "You have mastered Rasengan, a beginner." Although it was a bit outrageous, with Uchiha Chi's current foundation, coupled with the meticulous Rasengan tutorial, his Sharingan, the Heaven's Curse Seal, and superb body control, this combination allowed him to use a Rasengan before Minato, a Rasengan that Minato had not yet created. Holding the Rasengan, Uchiha Chi wiped the sweat from his forehead, then looked up at Minato. "Your jutsu should be trying to achieve this." At this time, Minato's gaze had changed from indifference at the beginning, to surprise and wanting to warn that it was dangerous, and then to shock after the Rasengan took shape. He asked in a lost voice, "See, how did you do it, huh?" Uchiha Chi raised his hand and waved away the Rasengan in his hand, looking at Minato and explaining patiently, "Your jutsu is almost complete. It can't be rolled out and exploded because it lacks stability, causing the chakra to rotate irregularly and maintain its shape. This is too difficult, but I used one hand, just like a cat using its two paws to slap a water ball, constantly changing the direction of the water flow in the water ball, suppressing the chakra protruding from the spherical shape, and finally I was able to temporarily stabilize this state." Minato was suddenly startled, as if he had been enlightened. The vortex of hair, the slapping of cat claws, his face was filled with surprise, a blush rose on his cheeks, and he raised his hands excitedly. His two hands began to rub the Rasengan like Uchiha Chi, and soon, he rubbed out an identical Rasengan. "I've seen the prototype for the first time." Minato looked at the Rasengan in his hand in surprise, revealing a hearty smile. "Thank you, see, your theory is correct. Then, I will name it." He raised his head, looked at Uchiha Chi, raised a finger, and pointed at the Rasengan in his other hand. "Light Wheel Cat's Claw Reverse Inspiration Spiral Her Uchiha Shuangshigan, Stare." Hearing this long and ugly name, and seeing Minato rolling the ball with both hands like Naruto, Uchiha Chi was embarrassed for a moment, not knowing how to complain. "What the hell, he actually taught me the way his son taught me." After thinking about it, Uchiha Chi still couldn't bear to let the name of the Rasengan, which was born to protect Kushina, lose its original meaning. Let Minato use this trick to defeat the Nine Tails, win the heart of the cute girl, and finally get the name it deserves. Uchiha Chi decisively interrupted Minato, shaking his head and reminding him, "Ahem, let's talk about the name later. Also, this method is just a trick. To use it in real combat, you still have to perfect this technique according to your original ideas, otherwise, This unsealed jutsu will lose its original meaning. Minato thought about it and nodded in approval. Yes, you have a point. The Rasengan's power lies in its unsealed instantaneous jutsu, a technique designed to target the tailed beasts. Rubbing the Rasengan with both hands like a seal would only waste time and miss the opportunity. Naruto's behavior was forced by his limited talent, and he had multiple shadow clones to compensate, while ordinary ninjas couldn't release many shadow clones. Uchiha Chi finally exhaled, raised a pair of serious scarlet Sharingan, looked at Minato, and said solemnly, "Minato, the move you just made is really important to me, and it is very inspiring, just like I am inspiring you in this tricky way now. I have no intention of stealing this ninjutsu that belongs to you. The conditions I just mentioned will still be fulfilled. Moreover, we have fought side by side, and you have witnessed my abilities. A mere explosion can't kill me. You don't need to worry about my safety, so, please teach me the very cool move just now. This is really important to me." Uchiha Chi saw it very clearly. Now, although he possesses the Earth Grudge secret technique, immortality, fire style, chakra mode, forbidden technique, immortality, heaven's curse seal, zero tail, this bunch of outrageous configurations. It sounds like he's practically unbeatable among cage-level warriors, but one knows his own business. He struggled mightily to defeat the unremarkable Ebizo, though that was also due to his depleted chakra from breaking through the 300 Sand Clans formation. But it also made him realize how vain he was. His techniques and abilities, the Earth Grudge secret technique, which only had thread and suturing abilities. His immortality, which only had slow healing and immortality, lacked the ninjutsu resistance and curse abilities of hidden. His fire style, chakra mode was effective against those below cage level, but against those above, it was more of a special effect than actual power. His forbidden technique, flesh rebirth, was incomplete, capable of only partial, accelerated regeneration and carrying significant risks. An enemy with similarly advanced eye techniques, combined with their ability to pierce and seal acupuncture points, could easily deflate him like a deflated balloon, much like Sasuke puncturing Shannon with his Chidori Senbon. The Heaven's Curse seal, whose power and risks are completely unknown, has no immediate follow-up. Orochimaru has even now completely sealed it with the Sealing Evil seal, rendering it unusable. And the final Zero Tails, known as the Shame of the Tailed Beasts, is only a juvenile, like an HD 4000 graphics card running Red Dead Redemption, constantly running out of mana. Now, this move, inspired by Minato, uses a human form to unleash the power of the tailed beast balls. It could complement Uchiha Chi's shortcomings, combining his strengths and weaknesses to maximize his abilities. How could Uchiha Chi not be tempted? Faced with Uchiha Chi's sincere gaze, Namake's Minato fell silent for a moment. He felt a strange sense of satisfaction. This seemingly random move had actually earned Uchiha Chi's respect and recognition. After a long while, Minato nodded seriously, revealing a bright smile. "In the case, okay, let's do it again." Chapter 172, Expanding Rasengan and Big Rasengan. Human puppetry creates regeneration core. Minato's face turned serious, his smile fading as he stared intently at the palm of his raised right hand, as if he were taking a postgraduate entrance exam. He muttered to himself, "I think I understand why I made a mistake. We need to reverse the Nimbus Cat's Claw to trigger the Uchiha Shuang Shikigin to explode." Uchiha Chi couldn't help but twitch his lips. "I told you not to use that name anymore." This little sarcasm didn't affect Minato's concentration, but when Minato spoke the next words, Uchiha Chi's expression froze, and he listened intently. At that moment, a round, azure blue sphere appeared in Minato's palm. Unlike a normal Rasengan, this one was a darker shade. Furthermore, upon its appearance, the Rasengan began to rapidly expand, its surface becoming extremely unstable. "I understand." Minato raised an eyebrow, staring intently at the expanding Rasengan in his palm, and said suddenly, "The important point is not the violent chakra rotating around the core, it's the point at the core. Just like what you said, see, the chakra of the protruding sphere must be suppressed to stabilize this technique. Before, because I unconsciously imitated the tailed beasts, I compressed the point at the core, causing the chakra around the core to rotate faster and then out of control. So, the key core, its compression, the compression of the light wheel cat claws reversely inspired the core of the Uchiha Shuang Shikigin." Looking at the rapidly expanding Rasengan in Minato's palm, which was almost about to explode, Uchiha Chi widened his eyes slightly. At this moment, he seemed to be possessed by Conan, and suddenly he was enlightened. Minato was worthy of being the founder of the Rasengan. After completing the normal form of the Rasengan, he quickly deduced the reason for its failure. Sure enough, for questions about this kind of ball, it is better to ask the founder. Having witnessed a tailed beast ball, Minato conceived the Rasengan, developing a new technique based on it. This resulted in this expanding Rasengan, which resembles the tailed beast ball. Compressing the core increases centrifugal force, driving chakra into frenzy, accelerating until it becomes uncontrollable and begins to expand uncontrollably. Furthermore, from Minato's words, Uchiha Chi quickly thought of another Rasengan variant, the Rasengan Rinnegan, used only by Menma Uzumaki in the limited Tsukuyomi movie Road to Ninja. It uses the same compression principle, but it also compresses the chakra rotating around it. And its advanced version, the Great Rasengan, has a range comparable to that of the Super Shinra Tensei. With a single strike, it could devastate Konoha. At this moment, Minato's eyes lit up again. This variant of the Rasengan, his considerable intelligence immediately connected it to the roughly similar principle of the Rasengan. If the core and outer chakra are compressed together, then perhaps this form of the light chakra cat's claw, a reverse inspiration for the Uchiha Shuang Shikamaru, can also be stabilized, and, it seems the power can be increased. Uchiha Chi fell silent, unsure how to answer Minato's question. Increased? Of course it can be increased. After all, this is a giant Rasengan. But what the hell is this? Could his influence have led Minato to develop the giant Rasengan that only appeared in the movie? This is bad. King Shu has been superpowered. If Flying Thunder God flew over the enemy village and unleashed a magical giant Rasengan, the scene would be too beautiful. Uchiha Chi couldn't even imagine it. Let's not talk about the distant, but just the near future. What would the Ob team, Lao Dao, who would soon meet Qing Shui, think when they saw this newcomer, their nemesis, unleash a Rasengan? How deep would the psychological trauma be? However, just as the two developing the new technique were lost in thought and began to discuss, in the distance, Nahara Rin waved and called out, "Minato-sensei, Mr. C, it's time to start cooking." The three children returned, carrying the wood and vegetables they had gathered. Looking up, they saw Minato holding a rapidly expanding, violent, and volatile ball of azure light in his palm. Their teacher, standing there, completely ignoring the impending explosion, his eyes gleaming as he chatted and laughed with Uchiha Chi beside him. The composition of this scene was so bizarre that it stunned the three children for a moment. Obito was so frightened that the dead branch in his hand clanged to the ground, and he screamed in terror, "Sensei, Ki, it's going to explode." "It's going to explode, huh?" Minato was stunned for a moment, then suddenly looked up at the Rasengan in his hand, his pupils shrinking. He immediately disappeared and reappeared at the Flying Thunder God mark 200 meters away. He quickly threw the expanding Rasengan in his hand and returned to the haystack. The next moment, boom! The expanding Rasengan, unconsciously infused with a large amount of chakra, exploded with a loud bang, exploding a small pillar of light not far away. A strong wind suddenly swept in, sweeping upward, grass roots, and broken tree trunks and branches in all directions. What was that? Kakashi and the other two stared at the explosion site, jaws dropped. They lowered their arms to block the wind and stared at the disheveled Minato in astonishment. At this point, Minato breathed a sigh of relief, then raised his head, scratched his head, and smiled faintly. "Well, it's just a new jutsu we're developing. It's quite dangerous right now, it could explode at any moment." He turned to look at Uchiha Chi and said, "See, we'll discuss the jutsu when we get back to the village. Now that things have come to this, let's eat first." Uchiha Chi nodded. He had learned the principles of the expanding Rasengan from Minato and mastered it. He had already gained a lot, and he imagined Minato had as well. The remaining problems, such as controlling dark chakra to condense the dark Rasengan, integrating it with Senjutsu, and refining the Rasengan into an artificial tailed beast ball, would need to be solved by him. Moreover, Uchiha Chi had a hunch that practicing this jutsu would be terrifying. This was not a suitable place for training. As for the principle of the expanding Rasengan Minato mentioned, and how to compress the Rasengan core, Uchiha Chi already had a rough idea. Inspiration came from the skill that unleashed from Ebizo after he killed him. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he used his consciousness to open the panel, searching through the subtitles to find the most recently acquired skill. "Dang, you bravely defeated Ebizo, the supreme commander of the Sands village who attempted to kill you. You gained a random skill from him, human puppet jutsu, creation regeneration core, Beginner, the counter-attack was powerful. And the opponent was already dead, unable to refute. The bonus is a critical hit, the skill has been critically impacted. Current attribute, Human Puppet Jutsu, Creation Regeneration Core, Proficient, your heart steel level has increased, Human Puppet Jutsu, Creation Regeneration Core. This jutsu is the precursor to the eternal art of the Sands Village Genius, the future Akatsuki S-rank renegade ninja, Scorpion of the Red Sand. Scorpion achieved a unique form of immortality by transforming himself into a human puppet and transforming his heart into an eternal chakra regeneration core. This regeneration core could release hundreds of chakra strands, achieving the ultimate masterpiece of the 100 Machines maneuver. The key to his achievement lay in this one technique. This forbidden technique transformed the deceased into a human puppet, condensing a chakra core and harnessing all their abilities in life. Uchiha Chi pondered, if you can condense the chakra of the dead into a chakra core, it's undoubtedly a high-end compression technology. Perhaps it could also be used on the living. Chapter 173. Yes, I am the god of food. The shock from Uchiha. The training of his new technique came to a close, and the sound of clanging brought Uchiha Chi back to reality. The three small and large creatures around him were already squatting around a pot they had salvaged from an abandoned village. And surprisingly, the one cooking wasn't the gentle and kind Nahura-rin, known for her excellent cooking skills, but Uchiha Obito. Baring his teeth, Obito tapped the pot's rim with a rusty rice spoon, pushing up his goggles. He smirked at the slightly surprised Uchiha Chi and said, "See, even if you become a genin, you're no match for me in this area. During these missions with Kakashi, I've really honed my culinary skills." With that, Obito expertly added the washed wild vegetables to the pot, stirring the pot with one hand, the other behind his back. His movements were silky and fluid, like a master chef. Uchiha Chi's breath caught in his throat, a wave of shock etched in his heart. "Tsuchiya, why did teaming up with Kakashi to do missions help you hone your culinary skills? What exactly are you responsible for in the team?" Upon hearing this, Minato and Nahura-rin were both shocked and looked at Kakashi in astonishment. Kakashi, on the other hand, covered his forehead slightly and fell silent for a moment. Was he going to say that because he had completed all the missions ahead of time, Obito had nothing to do and could only compete with wild vegetables every day? Obito didn't understand the shock in the eyes of the three people looking at him. He just felt that the three of them must have been shocked by his skills, and immediately showed off his skills again. "Watch this, even without seasoning, I can make dishes that perfectly bring out the original flavors of the ingredients." After a while, a plate of stir-fried wild vegetables was freshly baked. Kakashi, his teammate having already tasted it several times, was the first to pick up his chopsticks. Minato and Nahura-rin hesitated for a moment before picking up a portion. After taking a bite, Nahura-rin exclaimed in surprise, "Huh, Obito, not bad." Minato nodded, commenting, "It's better than the Hiryo Maru." Uchiha Chi leaned in closer, picked up a piece, and popped it into his mouth. His brow furrowed in thought. Well, compared to the Hiryo Maru, this thing tasted only slightly better, but considering its nutritional value and satiety, it was more like a side dish to go with it. While Uchiha Chi was savoring it, the other four had already unanimously taken out their Hiryo Maru and prepared to start their dishes. "Wait," Uchiha Chi shouted, immediately reaching out to interrupt them. He shook his head at Obito. "Tsuchi-sama, you don't know what cooking is." Uchiha Chi pointed at the stir-fried wild vegetables in the pot, a look of disappointment on his face. "The wild vegetables have too many tendons. Fail, the heat is not right. Fail, the soup smells like earth. You didn't even wash the vegetables thoroughly. Fail, let me, your big brother, teach you how to make a pot of delicious wild vegetable soup." As soon as he finished speaking, Uchiha Chi first poured out all the wild vegetables in the pot under Obito's stunned, as if murderous, gaze. Then he formed the sea seal, created a pot of water, and began to boil it. Then he used local materials, picking up wild vegetables and tree bark, and walked around the forest, finding many colorful mushrooms, wild fruits, and rosemary. He stood seriously by the pot, recalling a skill he had just acquired in the land of soup. Delicious cooking methods for wild vegetable soup and tree bark, mastered. Accurately following the recipe, he added the various ingredients, blending them with the simplest techniques, then covered the pot. Finally, he used the fire-style, great fireball jutsu to simmer the sauce until it thickened. The moment he opened the lid, a golden light seemed to rise from the pot. A hallucinatory aroma suddenly surged. "Minato, Kakashi, and Nahorin's eyes lit up simultaneously. Obito first glanced at the colorful, fragrant, and delicious feast of wild vegetables, then looked up at Uchiha Chi. You? His face was filled with astonishment, a look of doubt on his life. No, Uchiha Chi, you bastard. It's okay to be a ninja. You're even going to challenge me for cooking. Are you still human? Uchiha Chi sipped his vegetable soup, his expression calm yet tinged with a hint of pretentiousness. Yes, I am the true god of food. Hearing this, Obito was struck by lightning, his face etched with dismay. He simply channeled his anger into appetite, picked up his bowl, and began to eat like a piglet. After 2 days of trekking, the team finally arrived at the gates of Konoha village. Though called a village, Konoha was actually quite large, the size of a city-state. According to an expert's inaccurate calculations based on a certain anti-US flying chart, Konoha village's radius alone was 40 kilometers long. At Bolt's 9.58-second 100-meter sprint, it would take nearly an hour to run from the Hokage building to the village gate after accepting the mission. Of course, only such a vast city could support the 855 D-rank missions that Uchiha Chi had struggled to complete even with his sheer effort. At least, judging by Uchiha Chi's experience after living there for over a year, Konoha was indeed quite large. Meanwhile, at the main gates of Konoha, after completing their handover and registration with the gate guards, who weren't yet part of the Konoha Gate Gods, Team Minato and Team Uchiha Chi parted ways, heading to the Hokage building to report on their duties. They'd agreed to meet Minato at Konoha's third training ground. Standing at the main gates, Uchiha Chi was unsure where to go. For the past month, he'd been out of the village as a family ninja, but along the way, he'd acquired the quadruple status of both a Konoha Anbu and a root ninja. So, who should he report to when he returned? Before returning, Ryoma of Urame had tipped him off, letting him know Danzo wanted to see him. He also knew Orochimaru was conducting secret experiments and was expecting him to take on the crucial role of handling experimental materials. But neither party had given him accurate information about what to do. It was as if Uchiha Chi had been deliberately forgotten, or as if both parties were waiting for him to come to them personally. Uchiha Chi shook his head, deciding to ignore them and go home first. At that moment, a middle-aged man with short brown hair, distinctive lines on either side of his eyes, and wearing a dark blue robe with the Uchiha clan's round fan emblem tattooed on his back, stood up from a stone bench not far from the village entrance and approached Uchiha Chi. Uchiha Chi immediately recognized him as the Uchiha Yushiro, a high-ranking Jonin from the hawkish faction of the Uchiha clan. He had only seen him in the manga. This was his first encounter in real life. The Yushiro quickly approached, frowning slightly at the unremarkable, ragged Uchiha Chi. He asked, "Are you Uchiha Chi?" Uchiha Chi nodded. "Yes, it's me. What can I do for you?" He looked up at the serious-faced Uchiha, wondering if this was also the arrangement of the great elder, Uchiha Setsuna. The Uchiha Yushiro frowned. Even though he had received letters of praise for the young man from numerous Uchiha clansmen, his first impression of Uchiha Chi after meeting him was less than impressive. While the young man's tall stature and handsome features perfectly matched his clan's aesthetic, making him feel he would become a future leader, his childish face now proved him to be nothing more than a 12-year-old. He looked handsome, but not at all strong. Yet, a child of his age was receiving unwavering and confident praise from Uchiha Fugaku, Shisui, Shinichi, and even Seiichiro. Thinking of the instructions from the great elder, Uchiha Setsuna, the Uchiha Yushiro, though still somewhat emotional, chose to obey. He shook his head, frowned and said helplessly, "Come with me, let's go to Nanga Shrine." The great elder instructed, "The first thing you have to do when you come back is to learn a forbidden technique." Hearing this, Uchiha Chi was immediately stunned. Forbidden technique? What forbidden technique? Looking at the kid in front of him with a confused expression, Uchiha Yushiro suddenly opened his squinting eyes, revealing the three Magatama Sharingan rotating in his eyes, and then said indifferently, "Forbidden technique, Izanagi." Chapter 174, Forbidden Technique Izanagi, Trial of Inheritance. Forbidden Jutsu, Izanagi. This is one of the Uchiha clan's ultimate eye techniques. It activates by forming the three seals of Mao, Hai, and Wei, bridging the gap between fantasy and reality. It can render all unfavorable events within a certain period of time into non-existence, while only those favorable to the user become reality. Even if one dies during the activation period, this technique can alter reality and reverse life and death. Having witnessed Madara, Obito, and Danzo use this forbidden technique, Uchiha Chi had some understanding of it. However, what puzzled him was that it required at least a 3 Magatama Sharingan, a characteristic of the Uchiha lineage, to activate. Upon using it, one would permanently blind one eye. Uchiha Chi's Sharingan had only evolved to 2 Magatama. Now, the Great Elder, Uchiha Setsuna, was asking him to learn this technique? If a situation truly necessitated the use of Izanagi, what would be the consequences of using this technique with a 2 Magatama Sharingan? Blind? Or, as described in this technique, after placing oneself in the gap between fantasy and reality, one will be forever trapped in fantasy and unable to break free because the level of the Sharingan is not high enough to distinguish between reality and dreams? Uchiha Chi is unknown. Under the leadership of Uchiha Yushiro, the two quickly headed to the Minamiga River. The Minamiga River is a river that flows through the Konoha village, from south to north, passing through the entire village. The river under the wooden platform where Obito, and even Itachi and Sasuke in the future stood when they practiced a fire-style, great fireball technique, is the Minamiga River. In ancient times, on both sides of this river, the Uchiha clan lived on one side and the Senju clan lived on the other side. Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama, who founded Konoha, also met on this river. The two followed the Minamiga River, passing through the bustling morning streets of Konoha, strolling through residential areas, and then passing the Uchiha clan's territory, located in the heart of Konoha, south of the Hokage building. Finally, they arrived at a vast, undeveloped forest south of Konoha village. Including the southern urban area and this vast forest, all of it belonged to the Uchiha clan. The main hall of Minamiga Shrine was located here. Entering the main hall, the room with the 7th wooden door from the right was the secret gathering place of the Uchiha clan. However, the Uchiha Yushiro did not enter this room. Instead, he led Uchiha Chi further inside, until they reached the basement of Minamiga Shrine via a wooden staircase. He lit a bonfire in a secret chamber, illuminating it with flames. Uchiha Chi then realized he had arrived at a place that looked quite familiar. A single glance at the stone tablet above the room revealed that this was the very same secret room where Uchiha Madara was tricked by Black Zetsu, and also the very same room where Sasuke and Orochimaru summoned the previous Hokage during the 4th Shinobi World War. At this moment, Uchiha Yushiro, who had been facing away from Uchiha Chi, turned around. He took a deep breath and spoke solemnly, "Kid, listen carefully, this place is the Uchiha clan's top secret inheritance. I don't know why the Great Elder asked you to come here, nor do I know if you, at your young age, can understand, but, since everyone has chosen you, it is you who will inherit this 1,000-year-old legacy. Accept this weight of love, then you have the obligation and responsibility to shoulder the responsibility of the clan, and then, you must keep moving forward." Uchiha Yushiro looked at Uchiha Chi solemnly, raised his hand, and pressed it against a secret compartment on the wall. Boom! The wall of the stone chamber rumbled and swirled, revealing a massive bookshelf behind it. It was filled with densely packed scrolls, large and small, long and short. At a glance, there were probably no fewer than 1,000. Uchiha Chi's eyes widened slightly. The scrolls were categorized by the 5 elements, secret techniques, and usage methods, filling an entire wall. And behind this wall, there was even more space. Uchiha Yushiro looked at Chi's expression, smiled complacently, and introduced aloud, "What is displayed here are all kinds of ninjutsu and secret techniques that the Uchiha clan has collected, created, and robbed over the past 1,000 years, in the entire Konoha, except for the forbidden techniques in the Book of Sealed and the secret ninjutsu of the major families. All the techniques you can find are all here. We also have family ninjutsu of some small families, such as the Inuzuka clan and the Amber clan, but we just don't bother to use them, and behind this bookshelf are all kinds of precious treasures, ninja tools, rare metals, including chakra metals in the ninja world. They fill up 10 warehouses, which are even enough to support all the expenses of the Uchiha in launching a ninja war against a big country." Uchiha Chi blinked and couldn't help but open his Sharingan and looked behind the bookshelf. With just a quick glance, he saw that the walls of the warehouse were actually welded by a piece of golden gold piled up like a mountain. No wonder the 1st and 2nd Hokage played with a Saiyan transformation in this secret room during the 4th Shinobi World War. Even with a burst of energy, the room didn't collapse, but only created a small crack on the wall. This is the emotional reason. The value of these things that Uchiha Chi saw alone could no longer be calculated in units of 100 million. No wonder Uchiha Setsuna had asked the 3 members of Kumagakure for 100 million per head. Perhaps in Uchiha Setsuna's eyes, This amount of money was even cheap. Wait, senior 8th generation, what did you just say? Uchiha was suddenly stunned. He raised his head in horror, raised his hand tremblingly, and pointed at the wall. You said that I should inherit these things. Looking at Uchiha's useless appearance, Uchiha 8th generation couldn't help but shook his head. Then, he raised his eyes, looked at Uchiha calmly, and said lightly, yes, you will inherit it. Even Uchiha Fugaku, the police captain who was highly expected, didn't know about this place. The Great Elder nominated you to be the next head of the Uchiha clan. Uchiha was stunned and couldn't recover for a moment. That wall of burnt gold alone cost far more than 500 million. The Uchiha Yushiro stared solemnly at the golden wall, frowning deeply. He pondered the Great Elder's instructions and added, the Great Elder has allowed me to use the supplies here to help you complete your training. Then, defeat Uchiha Fugaku head-on, win the position of young clan leader. Hearing this, Uchiha couldn't help but scratch his head and swallow hard. He wasn't exaggerating. Even with Fugaku's current combat power, even without opening his main Gekyo, he could still be hung up and beaten with one hand. After all, it would take several years for Uchiha Fugaku to die and for his teammates to open their main Gekyo. The Uchiha Yasudaro paused, his eyes falling on the useless look of Uchiha swallowing his saliva dryly, his brows furrowed, and he said coldly, however, even if you have been recognized by many Uchiha, I still don't think you are worth such an investment. I want to obtain the forbidden technique, Izanagi. I want to use the materials here to fully practice the S-level forbidden sword technique Uchiha style, Ho dancing. I want to become strong enough to defeat Uchiha Fugaku. The Uchiha Yasudaro suddenly raised his hand and turned, twisting the secret compartment, causing the golden wall in the ninjutsu scroll wall to hide again in the wall blessed with countless illusion sealing techniques. Then he looked at Uchiha calmly, opened a pair of 3 Mogatama Sharingan, and said coldly, you need to undergo a inheritance trial. Chapter 175 Hollow Dog Cannon. Artificial Tailed Beast Mode, first revealed. Upon hearing that the Uchiha Yushiro was planning some kind of inheritance trial, Uchiha immediately assumed the clan had some sort of secret realm, like those in fantasy novels. He'd enter it, undergo tests like self-examination, determination, and the trolley problem, and then trigger the apparition of some ancient Uchiha grandfather. After some profound advice, he'd receive a reward or something. But what left him scratching his head was that the Uchiha Yushiro, right in front of him, began writing letters and soliciting help. This man, who disliked Uchiha, led him back to the top of Nanga Shrine, to his end garden behind it. The garden was meticulously appointed, its layout ingenious. The trees, the gravel, the sky, the earth, the rockery, the statues. Just looking at it, Uchiha felt it was profound, perhaps imbued with deep meaning. Amidst this stunning scenery, a deer dappled the water, a red bridge nestled in the forest, a towering tea house, a white sandy beach, and fish frolicking in the pond, all reflected the lazy afternoon sun. Amidst this breathtaking scenery, Uchiha was ordered to change into a short-collared kimono and wait in the courtyard. For a long time, no one came. Standing barefoot on the white sand, curiosity drove him to break 2 deer darts. Fearing he would lose money, Uchiha hesitantly hid the bamboo tube behind the rockery in the courtyard. His clumsy footwork also collapsed half of the hollow stone behind the rockery. For a moment, the scene in the courtyard resembled a tornado destroying a parking lot. He dared not touch anything else in the courtyard. They all looked valuable. After paying for Minato's Rasengan, his meager ninja salary probably wouldn't be enough to cover the damage. Finally, with nothing else to do, Uchiha stood silently in the courtyard, nervously closing his eyes and pretending to be a master. At that moment, 2 elder voices echoed from afar. Not bad, this young man has great bearing. Mount Tai collapses before him, yet he remains unmoved. A deer rises to his left, yet he remains unblinking. As expected of the young genius of the Uchiha clan, Uchiha fell silent for a moment, recalling how, just a month ago, he had been called the shame of the Uchiha clan. He slacked off on his training, spending his days obsessed with D-rank missions, disrespecting his elders, contradicting his superiors, and even getting kicked out for visiting a brothel. The term young genius truly made him blush. He opened his eyes and saw the Uchiha Yushiro walking in front, followed by 2 elderly men dressed in impressive attire. All 3 wore armor typical of the Uchiha clan during the Warring States period, carrying long swords and massive scrolls. Their armor was impeccable. They approached with the gait of a dragon and a tiger, creating a formidable visual impact. On first glance, it was clear, these were truly masters of the masters. The 8th generation of Uchiha approached with his men, stopped, stared at Uchiha Chi, and said in a cold voice, "Kid, as you can see, these two seniors, Uchiha Ji and Uchiha Wu-Ai, and I, are the strongest people left in the clan now. The 3 of us are all elite genin who have experienced hundreds of battles, and even if the 3 of us join forces, we can't defeat the strongest man in the clan Uchiha Fugaku, if you want to compete with Uchiha Fugaku for the position of clan leader. Even if you have the endorsement of the Great Elder, you can't be too far behind in strength. In the Uchiha clan, there is only one code that we believe in, and that is, the strong is supreme." He paused, took a deep breath, and suddenly drew out a long sword made of chakra metal from his waist. The tip of the sword flashed with a cold light in the sunlight, pointing directly at Uchiha Chi. "Come on, use all your strength, and survive 10 minutes under the attack of the 3 of us, even if you successfully pass the inheritance trial." As soon as these words came out, the 2 Uchiha elders on the side frowned, and there was a slight flash of worry in their eyes when they looked at Uchiha Chi. "Yadashi, isn't this a bit too difficult for this little guy?" "Yeah, when Fugaku was as old as this little guy, he was still playing house with Mikado. If the 3 of us go all out, ordinary Jonin will probably be killed in less than a minute. Since it is the intention of the Great Elder, then we must follow it. The Great Elder must have his reasons for doing this." Uchiha Satoshi immediately frowned and shouted coldly, "The Great Elder is the Great Elder. I am me. Besides, even if we don't make things difficult for him, what about when he faces other clansmen? This kind of thing must be faced one after all." In the Uchiha, the 2 Uchiha elders fell silent after Yosatoshi's words, but before Yosatoshi could finish his words, suddenly, a clear, young voice interrupted him. "Yatek-senpai, are you sure you want me to use my full strength?" The 2 old men, along with the Yatek, turned in surprise, looking towards the source of the voice. Uchiha Chi scratched his head, asking anxiously, "Are you sure? God had mercy on him." Along the way, Uchiha Chi hadn't fought many normal ninjas. He'd only encountered Kages, and the rest he'd mowed down with his AoE abilities. He couldn't say how many Jonin there were among them. He'd originally planned to just stand there and let these 3 old men poke at him. 10 minutes of poking, and by the time they'd tired, they'd probably realize the difference between them. "But, you, Uchiha Yatek, insist on seeing me in my prime?" This confused Uchiha Chi for a moment. Hadn't Uchiha Yatek received a letter from Uchiha Shisui and Shinichi? Did they know that Uchiha Chi could single-handedly defeat an entire Sans village army? Or were the 2 old men brought by the Uchiha Yoshiro truly the Uchiha clan's most exceptional masters? Armed with the clan's arsenal of secret techniques, specifically designed to counter him? Could that massive scroll behind them be a super sealing technique comparable to the Uzumaki clans? The Uchiha Yoshiro was startled by Uchiha Chi's words, then sneered, a sense of absurdity welling up within him. A 12-year-old Uchiha brat dared to speak to a senior like that? To lecture him in such a tone? His eyes darkened, his lips curled into a sneer, and he sneered, "Use it, use all your might, don't blame me for not warning you." The Uchiha Yoshiro suddenly opened his eyes, revealing his crimson 3 Magatama Sharingan. "If you don't take this seriously, you'll die." Uchiha Chi, observing the other's serious expression, frowned slightly, his gaze growing determined. He took a deep breath and brought his fist down on his heart. "I understand, I'll give it my all. It just so happens, I've developed a new form these days." Uchiha Chi's eyes widened slightly. His pupils narrowing slightly, becoming sharper. A blood-red hue suffused his eyes, and veins resembling those of a Byakugan energy appeared around his eyes. Finally, within his eye sockets, they transformed into a pair of crimson, double-jawed snake pupils. This was a manifestation of the natural energy transformation and solidification within his body. In other words, these eyes could replace the Heaven's Curse seal and absorb natural energy. "Then, please, 3 seniors, please teach me." The next moment, the Bagua seal on his abdomen lit up, and the swirling sealing technique vanished into a pool of pitch black. His heart, beating violently in his chest, instantly ignited with a blazing white flame. Burning his soul, transcending his limits. This blazing white flame transformed into lines, accompanied by violent dark chakra bursting out from his abdomen, rapidly spreading throughout Uchiha Chi's limbs and bones. A call of the wild instantly echoed in Uchiha Chi's heart. At that moment, he realized that his idea was feasible. Artificial tail beast mode could be achieved. Moreover, the dark chakra from the Zero Tail, in this state, could also be manipulated in the manner of a Rasengan, forming the Senjutsu Dark Rasengan. However, since he was not in his seal form at the moment, his heavenly seal had been locked by Orochimaru with a sealing evil seal. Without the seal's blessing, he could not fuse Senjutsu chakra, and therefore could not use such a move for the time being. However, Uchiha Chi raised his palm, his snake eyes narrowed slightly, revealing a hint of madness. He seemed to have another way to use this simple, pure, and ultimate power. That was, artificial tailed beast mode, hollow dog cannon. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.